Yeah, I mean, it's just Luke Ford and the dangers of e-personality. And he's an introvert, incel or whatever. And when he comes out on the internet, he has this, like the dark side of his subconscious becomes conscious. I mean, to me, it's obvious. It's what happens. It's what's happening to you on the same way. But your unconscious, your subconscious is different than Gandalf's subconscious.
Logic and science dictate that not only consciousness doesn't exist, consciousness is in fact scientifically impossible. And yes, it is going to involve math and calculus and science and computer programming. I'm sorry. And that have different implications of the process with the connection between the levels of a person's soul and how it reincarnates.
But I'm not going to spur on the issue because I'm not a woman. It's not my issue.
About how one day you're going to fulfill the Canadian dream or the American dream. So you watch Seinfeld and say, I could do it. And I'm going to go out tomorrow and go to work and have a great day, and I'm going to be successful. And one day I'm going to have my own apartment. I'm going to have my own parties with my own friends over, and I'm going to have my own possessions. I'm going to see things that I want and just buy them.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of yours.
Hello and welcome back to Week in Review with the one and only Doooovid. I am your host, Jen, Church of Entropy. Happy to be here today for the show. I'll hand it over to you, Doooovid, for the introductions while I get all the icons set up.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, good to be back. I guess a pretty good week. With Claire on Charles Moskowitz. I streamed on my channel the American Contract Manufacturer Expo, and I spoke to a circuit board manufacturer. So it was pretty interesting. And I said that Thursday we had Claire come on Charles Moskowitz. Saturday I was on Politically Provoked's Pop on Chat, and Norvin was there. So I actually flowed his debate about secession with Bumpkin. So maybe we'll go over that if that's interesting. And then it kind of turned into just kind of like a yelling match. I guess they had some America First people popped on, maybe some big names I wasn't familiar, like Beardson and they were just kind of yelling, so it was kind of low class. And then James, STFU James, popped on, and he went straight into his routine.
Hey, bada boom, bada bing, pizza. Da, 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 da. How about sum it up?
Well, I mean, minus the curse words. So they had to immediately take the stream off of YouTube, and then we continued on Odyssey. So actually, they had almost like 100 people. There was over 150 people watching, for a while. And Marshall Lore from New Zealand showed up, and it was
Didn't
funny.
You say he was all jacked or something?
He looked buff. Like I saw, he looked different. Like, and you can see he put on, even though I could only see his face, you could just see in his neck and his face that he put on like a ton of muscle. He's probably been hitting the gym pretty hard. So
the three veins on his neck were twitching more than, or throbbing more than usual.
No, I mean, just see the muscle density was significantly higher. Like, I mean, like last time I saw him, he was kind of like Norvin, like comparable. But like this time, he looked like he put on a substantial amount of muscle mass, and you could see that, even just in a person's neck and facial features, some of the muscle mass. But yeah, people check that out. It was on BitChute. I'll share the links in a little bit. And so we got Wonder Crab in the chat. I'm not sure if he's back. I mentioned last week already he'd done that video. Had a lot of interesting geology. I like geology. It's a good subject. And so peace on to you also, Don. And you played some chess this week. So that's about it. I have a few links to share. I'll get those ready. Maybe I didn't do a chant last week. I'd done.
You did do a chant. You did do a chant. Remember, there was a bit of depression, but then steam rose a little and you do a mini chant. So feel free to do one or not. It's totally up to you. I like it sort of sets the tone.
Yeah, I should probably do a chant. And so this is already episode 128, so I've been trying to do like a different chant every week. And like I have to go back and sometimes the chant is like 5 minutes in, sometimes 30 minutes in. And so I've forgotten
It's part of
chants.
the joy of Week in Review, isn't it? Don't you love it, audience? Show us some love in the chat.
So let me open up some of these links that I'll share, and I'll let Jennifer talk for a few minutes. She had an exciting week, and then I'll share my links, and then I'll do a chant.
Hello, everyone. I probably won't get a chance to get through everything I did. So Wonder Crab, yeah, we'll show you the link after the intros, and we can have a chatter, which will be loads of fun. Okay, so my week, I actually did take notes this time, but predictably the thing I took my notes on is, I don't want to say Frozen because it's a Mac and they're not as horrible as Windows. It's obviously both horrible. It's got the little twirly rainbow thing right now, so yeah, it's word.
I was looking at the new Mac. I mean, it's like the new like M1 Max chip is like $3,500, and you could order, and it's not available till mid-December. But I was thinking I might end up getting this newest version Mac and their new like M1 Max.
Well, if you can afford it, go nuts. Like I remember, it was definitely an emotional decision the first time I bought a Mac, but I've had it since probably over 10 years now, and it's still going, and it's more than paid for itself at this point.
Yes, I was going to look at the newest one, and you probably get a new one, and I'm not sure. It'd be somewhere between $2,000 and $3,500, maybe in a week or two. Now they're not even available yet. You could pre-order them. We'll talk about that on Week in Review.
It is Week in Review, Doovid. Oh,
Okay,
I guess
but we
still
don't have to talk about it this week, I'm saying, because they're not even available till mid-December.
All right, so that'll be something to keep an eye open for. Week in Review Christmas edition. Do you want to do your links now, or do you want me to say what I've...
Yeah, I just interrupted because you mentioned the Mac, so go ahead.
I don't really have these things in an order. I was going to try to order them up while you were doing your intro, excuse me. One thought comes immediately to mind about the Socratic method with people, as I was recounting a story earlier, excuse me, about somebody wanting to debate me on the identity of indiscernibles, which is a definition. So debating about a definition is sort of missing the point. The idea is you define the terms. That's step one. That's metaphysics, the M word, the thing no one wants to hear about. And then you have the debate. And then it makes sense, which, as you can make, sort of calls to the fore this notion that most of these things we're billing as debates aren't, which is awesome that I understand that now. And I did a completely uncontroversial thing this week, which was moderation. And that was just great. In a stark contrast to the pile of basically nothing but controversy. Doovid seemed a little disappointed. Did I read that right?
Well, I wasn't disappointed, just whether it was particularly interesting to me. I don't say like disappointed.
Yeah, you want to see like a Jen Scharf TM dumpster fire, is that correct?
No, I don't want to see that at all.
Okay.
I'd say if you see me doing that occasionally, like that's not because I like doing it, it's because my duty. I'm saying, God forbid that. So like I saw you get in a fight, so you must like fighting. It's like no, like I hate fighting, but like occasionally.
Yeah.
But no, I have zero like for stuff like that. But I mean, so occasionally your duty. I'm more educational content, stuff on consciousness, straightforward.
And dumpster fires, right?
No. I absolutely no like. I mean, I have no sense of humor. I mean, last week it was so upsetting. Like I even like was tired after an hour and a half because like I'm adamant that laughter is just a sign of bad character.
Okay, well,
so like, I have zero enjoyment. In fact, like people who have enjoyment of that stuff, generally I try to avoid. just like if like to me it's bad character. So even someone who enjoys, so you see my participating in something like that. If you mistakenly think that I enjoy it, like I probably won't maintain a friendship with you, because like no, I do not condone that type of behavior, recommend that type of behavior, and even people who find that type of behavior funny, generally I take as a bad sign, and that I should avoid them or close association.
Thank you for clearing that up. Do you want me to keep doing my weekend review, or do you want to do yours? Because you normally go first.
Okay, I have all my links up, so I mean, if it's up to you
Sure.
if you want to.
Yeah, well, I'll get my stuff a little more organized, and I think it'll be smoother that way.
I mean, it was just your insistence on saying like me enjoying some sort of dumpster fire, which honestly I took as an insult.
I'm sorry about that. I meant it was something that you do, not that you enjoy it. You already clarified you didn't enjoy it in our DMs today, so sorry that I
Yeah, I mean, I use the
screwed up
bathroom a
what
few
I just
times a
said.
day too, but like I don't talk about it.
Well, whatever I did wrong, I'm sorry.
Well, you just insinuated that like I enjoy something like that, so I want to unequivocally make sure that like no, I have no.
You don't enjoy
enjoyment.
it. I shouldn't have said it. Let's move on. And I've got you screen sharing now.
Okay, so a new MIT course just came out on Introduction to Special Relativity. It's probably like, how many was it? Like probably like 15 hour, 10 hours of content, mostly in short videos. Let's see if they came out with anything new. So yeah, I've been watching these pretty regularly. I'm still in the middle of that one on the brain and the one on computation that I shared a few weeks ago. But I thought I'd share those. So at the beginning of the week, or maybe this was last week, they had in Texas like a IRL debate, and I guess this was a Destiny. They had Mike Cernovich or people debating about certain issues. It wasn't super high quality, but so I'd share that because they were somewhat larger public debates. Also, Luke Ford. I set up Luke Ford to be on Politically Provoked, and
congratulations for that. I'm sure he really appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually. Like he seemed to have the cold. Luke's a hard guy to read, and you see, like Luke is actually like pretty well read and educated. Like I don't think he actually completed his university degree. I think Luke was.
You're not big on sarcasm, right? Imagine being the opposite of that, and you're getting close to Luke.
Well, yeah, I'm saying like Luke reads the New York Times. Luke likes to consider himself educated, and even like like the genre, like Politically Provoked is in a certain genre of like internet blood sports. So Politically Provoked, I guess they have a pretty popular channel. I would say from what I'm seeing around, it's probably in the top 5-10 channels of stuff going on. Like I share the stuff Modern Day Debate. Not that interesting. I shared the Crucible, and this might even be like a Crucible spinoff. But a lot of their stuff's getting a few thousand views. They had Destiny on. So I Modern Day Debate, despite reaching out to them, I was not able to work out something or work together with them. I messaged them, way back. We discussed that. They never got back. Jennifer was eventually able to get on the show, but Politically Provoked, largely through Norvin, I was able to get in touch and start working together with them. And so I'm happy to help them build their platform. They actually, was making some money, I think, on the pop one. They maybe even made as much as $100 in super chats last night. Didn't get too many super chats with Luke Ford, but I felt Luke Ford was, he's pretty impatient. So I'm not sure exactly how that went. I mean, it didn't get that many viewerships. I'm not sure the Politically Provoked people were even that interested in Luke Ford or the history of the type stuff. And we'll talk about it maybe more in depth when I talk about Norvin's stream, is that even though they're kind of the genre of these JQ debates, they don't really know that much about it. They don't know who the people are on the so-called white nationalist front or the Jewish front. So it's kind of just like the Jerry Springer Donahue show, where they bring on people and they start yelling at each other, and they try to make some super chats. And so I'm trying to get them to up their content a little bit, So they even let me talk, but thank God they seem to be somewhat willing to work together. So, if anyone saw that, you could pop on. I think Elliot was on Luke this week also, or some of the old names. So in the chat, so you have to see what happens with Luke and his streaming. But so I had an IRL event this week, the Amcon Design and Contract Manufacturer Expo. So you've got an interview here with a chip manufacturer, and he went over kind of the company that makes chips and what they do, how if you actually had a device and you already had a chip design, and then they said that they make chips like usually in the high tens to hundreds of dollars, where they would make hundreds to thousands of units that would be for devices. And I asked them about the global shortage and supply chain. So if anyone caught that, we could talk about that. I found that pretty interesting. Um, Here was a random thing I found on YouTube. Joseph Cohn, not the same Joseph Cohn from Israel Advocacy Network in London. This is a professor in New York, and there's probably thousands of Joseph Cohns, just like Doooovid. And he had these videos on sociology about fame, and so they were minorly interesting topic, semi-related to stuff we talk about on Week in Review. Um, Jennifer, she's always getting paranoid about times like, okay, like we're not talking about COVID-19 or vaccines at all, even though sometimes I share links, and most of those links I share are straight, like they're not conspiracy stuff, they're straight up university experts. But like, so here was the latest SPLC report and kind of talking about hate crimes. And, there's a lot of, I guess, white advocates that we speak for. And in the US, crimes against whites are not considered hates. So, just here in 2020, there were 8,263 hate crimes. Almost 3,000 of them were against blacks, 1,400 against mostly gender identity, homosexuals of some sort, God forbid. They actually include 870 because of anti-white bias, 680 because of anti-Semitism. And these are more severe. So the ADL counts like almost anything, like just being made fun of, or minor, like a swastika being etched into something. As SPLC is more concerned with the actual severe, more severe things, usually actual violence. So if anyone's more interested about that, I'll share something else maybe in a second. I'll talk about the politically provoked Discord. Here, another MIT, I've been watching it as they come out, this MIT channel with videos on consciousness, brains, minds, and machines. So I've been watching all their videos as they come out. So they came out with another one recently about visual perception, detecting motion and shapes. This was a new YouTube thing where YouTube is about, they're going to disable the dislike count. So it looks like it's still active, but because of so many dislike bombs and trolls or whatever.
And the video has 110,000 dislikes and 13 upvotes.
Yeah, so I mean, the irony of the platform, which is, okay, we're using the platform for free, but the certain elements of it that it's very disliked, kind of like
there's bigger issues than that, which is a lot of these spam accounts aren't dealt with, and people doing things on the platform that they shouldn't be allowed to do. But yeah, I mean, no comment, I guess.
Yeah, so just in the news, a lot of people were talking about that, so I thought I'd share that. The ADL had their Never Is Now annual conference, a lot of speakers. That's, I think, the ADL. I think I have better information than ADL. Like they have your leaders and politicians, and but like honestly, they're kind of second tier. That's why I told Luke, like, they do some good work, maybe they do some bad work, but at the end of the day, they can have like these second tier lawyers. God forbid, but whether this is true or not, I'm not sure. That I mean, there was a synagogue. Someone tried to burn down a synagogue in Texas, and they claim that God forbid, this kid who tried to do it was at a rally together with Handsome Truth a few days after he appeared on Politically Provoked. I guess it was on Halloween that he, God forbid, tried to burn a synagogue, caused like $25,000 in damage, and they got together. Handsome Truth posted on Goyim TV burning a swastika. So they're claiming this kid who was arrested was the person in this video with Handsome Truth. God forbid. So you see, Politically Provoked just shared my upcoming debate this Friday with Cultured Thug. So looking forward to that. I'll put that link in the chat. And University of California. So I watch these, basically a lot of their videos. They come out with quite a few videos, but they're more interesting science ones that aren't pure introductory, or they're advanced, kind of like medical anatomy, evolution, anthropology. So they had one on conservative spine management and lower back pain. I was mentioning related to consciousness and the nervous system and perception. That I'm working on my anatomical understanding. But back pain is a pretty important thing. I read this book this week. I was talking with this Russian chess streamer about chess and Jews and chess and Kabbalah. And so I found this book online about chess and Jewish history and Hebrew literature. That chess has been mentioned in rabbinic literature for over 1,000 years. So it's just a section of stuff that chess players or streamers follow me on Week in Review, but like chess is probably right now one of my bigger things in streaming. God forbid, Danny Fenster from Metro Detroit. I've met him. I think he's been to the downtown synagogue. We have many mutual friends. He was doing journalism in Myanmar and before the coup, or the revolution, however you look at it, and he just got sentenced, God forbid, to 11 years in prison, hard labor, for being a journalist in suspicion of trying to overthrow the new regime. And so he's been locked up. They claim he was trying to leave the country, and they held him at the airport. So he was on his way out, and he had founded some sort of paper about Myanmar. And then the revolution there happened, and he stayed there. Maybe he was printing stuff that was anti the new regime, or maybe he was involved with some people that were trying to restore the old regime. Unclear, but they charged him and they sentenced him to 11 years of prison, hard labor. So like the State Department of the U.S., a lot of international people, like it's crazy, sentence a journalist to prison like that, and it happens to be God forbid, a nice Jewish boy from Metro Detroit that I've met. And so pray for Danny Fenster, free Danny Fenster. Here's Jennifer's stream with T-Jump. I'm sure we'll probably talk about that quite a bit. And here is my stream with Politically Provoked last night. So you can see STFU James got in there for some classics. So people want to check that out. And so it's kind of like just a shouting match, which is you might be. I mean, those are more popular. Saying like Jerry Springer. So I was putting something in the Politically Provoked chat, because like Jennifer's, people are like, what does it mean to be a Fed? How does the U.S. system work? And so I was mentioning how federal agents generally work in the U.S. and saying like, so let me just read this real quick. Could be like, oh, this guy's a Fed, this guy's a Fed. And so like, very unlikely anybody on the internet here is actually an undercover federal agent. And it's saying how you have informants, how that system works. So let me just read this quickly. Maybe Jennifer, to help her understand. Maybe in Canada it works similar. So it's like, according to my local ADL, you get a visit from the feds, meaning the FBI, if you actually call or make a direct threat, harassment of a local Jewish institute. Not just saying horrible things on the internet or social media, or God forbid, shit posting, Fed posting in a chat. You're talking about actually someone who calls their local synagogue, Holocaust museum, and here in Metro Detroit is actually the Holocaust Museum that gets the majority of um, the hate. But if you do actually call your local synagogue and say leave messages saying horrible things, it is likely you'll get a visit from the FBI. But not necessarily and even that, like, not necessarily everybody who even calls and makes a harassing phone call to a local synagogue is going to get visited by the FBI. And then can you actually, if the person, a lot of those people will actually use their real name and their real telephone number, so people will actually call and say exactly who they are, or they'll use their number, so they're not even hiding who they are. And so it's not like Richard Spencer or this guy Brandon Martinez, like the chance they're a federal agent. So just say even that's generally protected free speech. So the feds just visit the person and warn them that they're being watched, or what will happen to them if they continue their behavior or take it to the next level. So if you're harassing people, and not just like, maybe you're a streamer spreading hate, but even if you're just saying hateful messages online, usually you have to be actually targeting and harassing an institution or a person to get a visit from the FBI, and then you'll be warned that should you carry out the threats, that they're likely to get caught and the punishment will happen. And sometimes they can put minor charges on a person with the full force of law, threaten them with a few months or even a few years in prison, in which the case the feds might make a deal with the person to drop the charges if the person gives information about others. But usually the feds have lists, generally people they know who have committed crimes, that there is not enough evidence to charge them. Like, God forbid, they vandalized a synagogue or a black church or something, or committed some act of violence, that generally the law enforcement is extremely sure that it was a specific person that did it, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge them. So it'd be the type thing of an informant, where they give you actually a list, like, this is a person we know basically for sure they're guilty of a crime, but we don't have enough evidence to charge them. And that would be the type informants generally that they would use, where they would want a person to provide some sort of evidence to charge a person with a crime that they know already committed. So your average white nationalist on YouTube might be on the wrong side of the law, not for being a white nationalist, not for spreading hate on the internet, but usually completely unrelated things like drunk driving, having an unlicensed weapon, spousal abuse, getting in a fight at the bar, something like that has a minor charge, and then the feds, knowing that the person is involved in those type activities, would make an agreement to drop the charges for feeding information about bigger names. But those bigger names usually have to be extremely dangerous people, and it's usually people that have weapons. Usually not just someone who says horrible things on YouTube or even threatens violence or something like that. You're Doooovid saying some, threatening, saying God forbid occasionally. You're talking about people that the feds know have serious stashes of guns and stuff like that. So like an informant like that, in order to get off a crime, it's not going to be like, oh, I know who Doooovid is, and Doooovid said a threatening mark on YouTube. No, I mean, they're saying like, I know a person is, and they have like a whole basement full of AR-15s, and something like that, that you would actually have federal informants. Or if it's someone that is actually a known compound, like here in the United States, maybe New Zealand, maybe Canada, they have people that they know they're in compounds, they know they do weapons training, which here in the U.S. is not really a crime. So you could open up a compound, you could do weapons training, but that's not actually a crime. So that's actually the type thing where you might find an actual federal agent, where they would go to one of these compounds, but it's usually related to weapons. So I was just mentioning that because people, even Jennifer, getting paranoid. Like, I mean, you could be paranoid about getting a strike on the YouTube or something like that.
That's more the direction I'm going in. And just generally best practices online, because there's some real creeps out there, and it's not necessarily even warning people about feds, just creeps, is people who don't have good intentions towards you. Having dealt with people like that myself.
Okay, well, I mean, if you're worried about, so to say, censorship, you're saying like, yes, like, just mentioning COVID-19 or the vaccine or something, you might get a strike on your YouTube. It might cause some serious problems, and you be careful. and knowing the terms of service, or just saying something that's likely to get complaints against you, or trigger some sort of bot that is looking for certain words. And it could be, just a hater, just a joker, just some, jerk that figures like, oh, I'm going to report this person because I don't like them, and maybe I'll get them kicked off the internet because my life will be
Right.
better.
So make sure you get all those trigger words. Make sure you get all those bot words. Get them all out now. Let's just move on to the next thing, maybe, which is this logic diagram. I think you've made your point.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, I wanted to actually say that straight out. So I'm saying, people, you don't need to be paranoid. A person should know the rules. And it's saying, like, you could avoid talking about controversial issues, but it's better to just know the rules. And as said, the Talmudic dictate is that a wise man is lenient and a fool is strict, because a wise man knows the exact extent of the rules, what's forbidden and what's not, and could tiptoe around the rules, as where a fool is less familiar with the rules. So just completely avoid this subject. So if it's something like kosher or something, is it kosher, is it not kosher? So or medical advice or something like that, where a person really knows their stuff, they could tell you, no, this is okay, that's not okay. Like, even though this is very similar to the thing that's not okay, that the person has expertise to know what is wrong, why you could avoid that, what's something similar to it, why it's okay. And a person without that expertise, you're better off just avoiding it altogether, or not even staying close, as they put in Talmudic language, it'd be building a fence around it. And so from a Talmudic dictate, like, building a fence around sin is usually a good thing, that it's okay to be strict in order to keep a person extremely distant from sin. But as a person becomes wiser, you could be more lenient because you know exactly what you're trying to avoid. So do you want to do your week in review? I still do the chant, or I guess
maybe now's a good time to go ahead with the chant.
Yeah, so I was just showing my flow of the Norvin debate, and I showed that on the Papon last night. And I mean, Mark Smith is also like gangster rappers. That could also be things like drugs, or for Orthodox Jews, God forbid, it'd be like insurance fraud or something like that, where like someone gets caught doing insurance fraud, and then in order to get off of their charge, they have to hand in someone a bigger, or give a bunch of other names to the prosecutor in order to have their charge dropped. Or with drugs, where a small time dealer gets caught with a small amount of cocaine or marijuana, and in order to have their charge dropped, they have to hand in a bigger fish. So that's the general way that the U.S. legal system works. I'm not sure, is that similar to how it works in Canada?
Not really an expert on that subject.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite chants. I think it was one of the first ones I did for the Hasidic tunes. I have it in my head a lot. I chant it quite often. It's Yom Tov Ehrlich is the name of the composer. He may be still alive. No, he passed away. Like, I knew his son. I went to school actually with his grandson, and in New York, and I was friends with them. I even drove his son around in New York a few times, and his son-in-law. And he was a Yiddish composer, and so this was kind of like a fun tune used to chant. And it has Yiddish words to it, but I'll just do the tune and say, like, I stopped the screen share, so I might do the flow, but I don't think my handwriting is not going to be legible, so I just showed the screen share of the flow that I did. But if we go over the arguments, I won't do the screen share, because my handwriting is probably not going to be legible from it. So
maybe we should just do a separate show on your channel to go over that debate. It seems like you put a lot of work into that flow.
Well,
might be a good teaching moment for what you had mentioned earlier.
Well, I mean, it would be a teaching moment for I guess, politically provoked, and I'm not sure how much. Although Todd seemed to have a little interest, I'm not sure how much
You
interest
said you keep going on about how you want to be a debate coach, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, but I mean, I actually need a student. Like, I'm not gonna someone who watched and was into the debate.
And that's how you get students, by demonstrating your teacherly and scholarly abilities.
Yeah, so I did that last night on actually politically provoked with Norvin and Bumpkin right after their debate. So I mean, if you want, I could go over it on this. I mean, it's about secession and the structure of the arguments, but it's unnecessary if the topic is uninteresting to Jennifer of why, people think that the U.S. is going to fall apart, or why, racial tension or something would lead to that. And if you think it's too controversial,
I just think it would be better to do it on your channel as an actual debate analysis.
There's not enough content for a video on my channel.
Okay.
And I already did a certain amount of it last night. So and it's like, okay, I did those debate preps with Jennifer because it was actually her in the debate. But like, I'm not going to do a debate prep for Norvin. And like, I mean, unless Norvin wanted to come on my stream, I doubt he would. And I don't think it makes sense for me to like do a debate prep for Norvin. So I'm not, I just, because it was a popular debate, and I've debated Norvin a bunch of times, and Norvin's the one who referred me to or kind of recruited me for Politically Provoked, is why I floated, and I wanted to demonstrate the flowing technique to the people on Politically Provoked. But like, no, I don't think there's a stream on my channel, and at this point, I don't think they have that academic of an audience that's going to avow themselves to the method. Okay, so here's the Hasidic tune. 3-part, like most Hasidic tunes, paralleling the name of God. Yum, 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 ya, 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 yum. Ay, 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 ya, 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 yum. Yum, 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 yum. Yum, 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 ya, 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 yum. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ay, yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, oh, ay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, ma, 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 ma. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, yeah, yeah. Ay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ay, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Ay, yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, yeah, 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 yeah. That's a tune actually probably even most Orthodox Jews never heard. Most Hasidic Jews would be familiar with that tune. In fact, like if I went to a Hasidic synagogue, like people would be dancing. That's the type tune. Like people would be pounding on the table and clapping, and might even like get up and dance hand in hand. It's a pretty lively, exciting tune, and I chant it quite often because it's got one of these nice, I guess like journey type ones where you could do it in beats, like the ay ya 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 my ya 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 da 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 ya 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 ya. But instead of doing it note by note, kind of just string it all together with a ah yeah 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 yeah. Also, there's a lot of Hare Krishna tunes that are like that, where uh, the people will carry one. It makes for good chanting because people will carry the tune for a longer period of time, and it's somewhat difficult to actually do. So you get people that will exert themselves to do it, and it makes for lively chanting. So I've done that one before, but it's one of my favorites. So with that, welcome to Week in Review, and I'll hand it over to Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks for that. So as I was trying to get organized to do my intro, my Microsoft Word froze, which is what I had all my notes on. And now I can't find the document that they're originally saved on. Isn't that great? So I don't have anything ready to go now, except for what I have on my, let's have a look here. see if I can get this to stop. Can you just talk for a couple minutes because my Microsoft Word is sort of bugging out here. I'll be right.
Okay, yeah, I was muted. So yeah, so I'm not sure if there's any that Carl guy seemed to know Cultural Thug, and God forbid I listened to his video, and he was in prison for murder, and so he says in his video that it was self-defense or someone, he got in a fight in a parking lot, and he killed the guy, God forbid. And originally he had a sentence of life in prison, and he was able to appeal it, and it was reduced to like a 6-year sentence, and it was reduced to 3.5 years. And so I guess Cultural Thug became what he calls third positionist, but like he got red pilled actually on God forbid Hitler's Mein Kampf, and kind of became like a Nazi in prison, and actually from like the neo-Nazis, the prisons, the largest contingency of the extreme right, the extreme Nazi movement. And as I mentioned, like getting a visit from the Fed, a lot of these people are extremely dangerous and have been in and out of prison. And but he seems like a pretty big streamer. He debated Stephen Molyneux. I think he's been around from the beginning of like the Warski days, and has a pretty big following. I guess he's been kicked off YouTube a bunch of times. He's on Odyssey. We were on. He seems semi-reasonable. Like you said, he doesn't have so much of a formal education, but reads books, thinks about things. I actually saw he had a video on Gurdjieff, and I love Gurdjieff. Like the fourth wave. I'm more J.G. Bennett. In fact, the very first stream that I did with Jennifer, I had that clip, that quote about Gurdjieff and the rolling dervish dancing, like, stay here in this place. You have now learned the secret uh, to fulfill the desires of your heart. Stay here till you build up a force inside of you that cannot be destroyed, and then you will re-enter into the world, and you will use different forces to measure yourself. And so, Gurdjieff had extremely profound impact on Doooovid. It was actually a Hasidic Kabbalist that had went off the path for a little period in the 60s in Haight-Ashbury, and ended up in a Gurdjieff cult, and taught me about this stuff. But I've read quite a bit of Gurdjieff. I usually have found disciples of Gurdjieff in local areas that actually mentioned Gurdjieff. So it was interesting. He had a video on that, but he seemed, third position is kind of straightforward fascism. I guess Bumpkin, OV style. They talk about the 10,000 march on Rome, which I guess Mussolini took over the Italian government with just 10,000 people. So, like, God forbid, like the January 6th, that it was only 10,000 people that they were able to do a fascist takeover of Italy before World War II. But the third positionist is not necessarily Nazi. It's the version of Italian fascism, World War II. And I'm not an expert in that, but the debate is on the JQ. And so I will be defending historically the role of Jews, all Jews, so not just the religion, but Jewish communities anywhere in the world, any point in history, and the overall role that we've played in society. And so God forbid, Cultural Thug, I guess, is a severe critic of my people. So I'll be happy to defend us, and looking forward to that. That's next Friday at 3. So if any Cultural Thug third positionist in the chat, I'm not sure. I don't know. Okay, so Jennifer, I'm not sure if she's back, but we have Wonder Crab. So it's been a while. You mentioned you were moving, and that you wouldn't be streaming for a while. Maybe it was over a month. I saw you post a video like a few weeks ago that was kind of small, and then you posted the video the other day, and I have to say that, from my impression, was by far the best video you ever posted. It looked like you even had like technical edited stuff. It was like educational, where you're talking about like geology, and then you're flipping before and then you're actually like taking us on an adventure where you're hiking up some mountain and in teaching people stuff about the geological record. So props for that. Good work.
Yeah, I was kind of happy. The project got interrupted. I wanted to make it a little bit bigger, but maybe I can revisit the mountain when I have some more resources. But I've just been listening to a lot of Lex Friedman and going in that kind of direction, which is new for me. That's about all the report, I think, in my
I listened to
weekend
about
review.
half of his content. If it's science, AI, consciousness related, physics, consciousness, AI related, I usually listen to it. Like the drugs, fighting, politics, I usually don't listen to unless it's like a name or personality that I want to find out more about. But it turns out about half of his content, and of course I watched that all in 2-speed. But yeah, that's if it's higher intellectual, higher IQ content that will get your mind thinking about more important scientific concepts.
Speaking of which, on your views on laughter, do you think that laughter evolved, or do you think laughter evolved?
No, in fact, if I ever have the debate with Ben Watkins, I'm going to use laughter as one of the proofs of the soul. And I specifically mentioned last week, and Jennifer kind of has to bash Aristotle every time I mention him. But Aristotle's famous for saying that a child doesn't acquire a soul till he laughs, and that you could only laugh with the soul. And could also the question of animal consciousness because animals laugh. But that laughter is specifically related to cognition in the mind. Jennifer usually will mention burps or sneezes. And I mentioned that burps or sneezes serve usually a purely physical, digestive, exhaling of toxins or irritants function, like a person sneezes because you smell or some sort of irritant that we're trying to expel, or like a burp to readjust breathing patterns, as opposed to laughter, which is usually triggered by cognition, by a perception of something, or even like a joke or something clever. Although you could laugh from like tickling or something like that, um, so you don't need to understand necessarily the mind to understand a sneeze. You say like there's an irritant entered my nose, and um, and as an involuntary bodily reflex, I used the full force of exhalation to expel the irritant within my system, or like a burp like that, where whatever reason a person's breathing became irregular, a pattern that's an involuntary physical reaction, as opposed to laughter. You can't. I mean, you possibly can, but saying generally laughter requires some sort of mind explanation. So I would come on the soul to explain laughter. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you.
Sure. In your view, do you wholly deny evolution?
I study evolution. Like I probably read more books on evolution than all but like 1 out of 1,000 people. Like I read like probably on average 2 books on evolution every week. So like I read the last like few years I've read probably 100 books on evolution a year. And so in my lifetime I've probably read over 500 books on evolution. I'm a pretty big reader, speed reader. So but like no, I don't believe in evolution. But kind of like Freemasonry or Kabbalah, the greatest minds of previous generations described their insights into the world and human nature through the system of Freemasonry. Like if you're talking like George Washington, Isaac Newton, Leibniz, a bunch of famous people that wanted to describe esoteric concepts. That historically Freemasonry has been an extremely popular method. So for the last 100 years, the greatest minds trying to describe human phenomenon generally choose to do it within the frame of evolution. So that's why I read so many books on evolution. But like, no, generally I take an alternative framework, and you could say like as a Jew reading like Christian literature, and I don't really read that much Christian literature, but like if you were a Christian reading Jewish literature and you're saying like, no, I believe in Christ, but I love reading Jewish literature because like I just for whatever reason. So that's kind of like me with evolution. Like I really like understanding how and why we act the way we act in the relation of humans to the environment. And almost all of the greatest minds who think about these topics choose to write about it within the evolutionary frame. So even though I largely completely reject evolution, generally I think species were created as is. And if my belief pattern is more of a devolution, if you ask me how I think we came into being or the explanation for things, my understanding is that there were higher beings or higher forces that devolved into us. So my theology is almost the exact opposite of evolution. But like I said, I constantly study that stuff because the greatest minds of the last few generations, cloak insight into human nature in the world into the language of evolution. I don't know if you're agreeable to, or even look at it similar to what I'm saying.
Sure. No, I didn't know if you denied evolution or yeah, if
I'm famous
things
for
are.
debating against evolution. I mean, Jennifer debate. My first big debate was, JF against. I mean, I had a few JQ debates, but was against evolution. If I was going
Crabby.
to do debates, like anti-evolution is one of the main things that I debate. So, like, no, I'm an anti-evolutionist. I'm happy to even debate on the topic, for if it makes sense. But it doesn't change the fact that I constantly read books on evolution.
Maybe we'll save that for another day. I'll have to leave
Crabby,
it. I didn't
your
know.
audio is a little bit flat, and right now you're basically vertical, like you're sideways.
How's that?
Will you fix that?
I didn't know whether portrait or landscape was appropriate. I think things are
Well,
changing. Portrait is becoming more widely accepted. It used to be that was a no-no.
Well, landscape would probably give you the fuller screen because we only have like 30% of the screen of you. So the problem
you
wasn't
do
portrait
realize
or
it was
landscape. The
30%
problem,
before, except he was sideways, right?
yeah, the problem was that you were sideways.
Well, if you want the right, if you want me oriented correctly and any bigger, it's going to cost. So,
Well,
It
if
doesn't
it was
matter.
me, I wouldn't want to be sideways. That's
I
all.
wasn't even
I
going to
don't
mention that
mind
you were
that you're only
sideways.
taking up sub 30% of your thing. Like, I'm just happy to be here, frankly. So
I wasn't even
so
going to
here.
mention that you were sideways.
The audio is a bigger concern, actually, than
well, crabs do always move sideways. A crab never moves forward. I wanted to ask, I guess, on the Lex Friedman, because that's the direction I've been going, because he asks some very interesting questions about consciousness, and he ties in love, and I think he believes that you sort of need to have, for an artificial general intelligence, you need to have a conception of death and a self, a body, a physical thing, and all these attributes. And after thinking for a while, it's like the more and more you describe the human experience, it's not because the AI, the coder, will come at it as if we need to maximize awareness. We need as much data as possible, and they're also going about that linearly with code, as instead of like as I think Lex Friedman or someone like Elon would want to do, like literally a 3D brain or artificial neural net. But do you think that human consciousness is actually more accurately defined by like a limitation, the blindness to self instead of the awareness of self, or the blindness to all kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, generally that's the chunking theory, the limitation of patterns, and that you could only perceive things by chunking together smaller pieces of information. So I mean, there's two different things. So, like generally, I'm a full dualist and think that consciousness or the soul, the mind, exist in a non-material platform, and so the mind having limitations in that sense like the mind probably doesn't have those limitations, but within the material realm related to sense perception, that yet you have to piece things together bottom up, one chunk of information at a time, and it's a huge limiting factor. And I mentioned last week my biggest critique of Lex Friedman. I mean, he's MIT, he's top of the game. He knows his stuff. Like like I went to good universities, got good grades. If you pass, Jennifer graduated physics, math, and with honors. You have to know your stuff. You have to be able to do all the stuff competently, solve all the various type problems competently. Um, so Lex Friedman definitely has that. As I mentioned, that Jordan Peterson with Steven Pinker and Jonathan Haidt the other week that I shared the video, the link of their conversation, said that IQ drops about 10% when you bring talks of good and evil into politics. So Lex Friedman still has this concept of good and evil that he likes to talk about when he sees things. And so generally, I am able to completely separate good and evil from consciousness, that there might be some ulterior factor of good and evil, but our perception level, good and evil is more like a higher level rule that I think is independent, and that you could perceive the world completely independent of good and evil. So that's one, I would say, limitation or fallacy that I see him commit in almost all of his lectures. It'd be like World War II and or violence or something like that, and connect it to evil, which to me is just useless. Trying to bring a good or evil concept into consciousness. So I'm not exactly sure what his limitation is, that he can't see past good and evil. But yeah, I mean, like you're not formally in university, but so I mean to actually have a test to memorize and master all the various subfields of a field and be tested on it to know that you've done it right. So to listen to a systematic mind like Lex Friedman trying to explain these concepts, even though he seems limited by good and evil, which is a substantial limitation, I would say, that the chance that Lex Friedman would really break ground on some new revolutionary idea, or even be able to understand the most latest, deepest insights into consciousness, I would speculate that the limitation of not being able to see past good and evil would prevent him from that. And that's why I say, like, pure chunking theory in perception.
Sorry, you're muted, Krabby. I had to mute you because you're making tons of noise on the line. But you can unmute to go ahead and respond to Doovid anytime.
Yeah, so I'm just, as the chunking theory, like for perception, when you're just trying to put together like vision in the exterior world, and like what does the shape represent, and you have to put in the eye, where we have these, I think it was like 100 million different cone or these receptors that take in light cells, and eventually we turn these into shapes. But it's these single points of light that we take, and then our brain of some sort processes it into shapes, or even in the spiritual realm. My understanding would be that chunking is some sort of dual material spiritual process, but it would appear that it has to be a bottom-up process of taking single units of information and putting them together. And at some point, you have these higher level rules. So Friedman's basically a materialist that thinks similar to AI or computer programs, that these higher level rules of consciousness all reside in the brain. And I'm skeptical. I would even speculate possibly that none of the higher level rules operate in the brain. And it could be that all of the higher level rules of consciousness, in fact, come from the spiritual realm, even like the Platonic forms and shapes. So like sense perception, like vision, and just taking a few shapes and seeing it as an object. From my understanding, even that doesn't happen in the material realm, but in the spiritual realm. And so I think Friedman's greater understanding of consciousness is rather limited, actually. But he's a good teacher, and he could keep you probably busy for a few years started, and just how to think about these issues and some of the names and personalities and ideas on the market now.
Well, intelligence is certainly one thing, and to show that you've gone through the training for some of these things is also valuable. But I think most scientific advancements come from wisdom, and the distinction being that, sometimes it's a completely new model or inverted understanding from, as you put it, the country boy who comes to the city,
Country boy for
Nikola
high IQ.
Tesla, Nikola Tesla, or I mean, you could name a bunch of people, but innovate because they not necessarily had the technical skills. Although, I'm not saying intelligence is bad. It's just that I appreciate Lex Friedman because he is coming at it from a holistic angle. He's not breaking it down into these sort of reductionist. His point, I think, is that in order to create AI, the problem is not scientific it's so much as philosophical. It's you need to define what life is and what death is, and everything kind of follows that. I mean, we're talking about like chunking and describing the processes that we witness in the brain, but we have no real concept of what the brain is. So I think the most powerful, the largest leap that we could take is like fundamentally understanding what life and death and these kinds of these things are. And then, I mean, you can add on all of this intelligence that we've built up, all of this data about, whatever. Pardon, I'm in a parking lot.
Yeah, but all wisdom is useful, and to actually add insight or new understanding, you have to like I mentioned to Jennifer, and like, how come you haven't published? Everyone's always like, when are you going to publish? And like, if you're right, how come you don't want a Nobel Prize? But for generally publishing something, you need to do a complete historical overview, which means you need to know historically what all of the greatest minds have thought on the subject. And so you need a substantial amount of precursor information. So something like consciousness is really like the pinnacle of all wisdoms, in a way like real estate development is the pinnacle of all wisdoms. You need to, to do real estate development, you need to know the construction, the engineering side of actually putting up a building. You need to know the business, the finances, the urban planning, politics, governance. So for consciousness, you need to know all of the sciences extremely well: biology, anatomy, physics, chemistry, philosophy, theology, um, science of philosophy, metaphysics, ontology, extremely well to understand consciousness. So you could think about it, say like everyone has consciousness and could have a little bit of insight immediately into consciousness, just like meditation. Like I'm meditating on how my own mind works, and so people all have insight into the workings of their own mind, and it could conceivably provide insight even to someone who's been studying it for years. Like I've been studying it for 20 years plus now, including all sorts of methods. But it's possible even like a young kid just examining their own mind, beginning meditation, would be able to, through examining their own mind, tell me an insight that I wasn't aware of. But say like you have to work your way up and slowly put together the chunking of the prerequisite pieces of information necessary to understand your own mind, even though you could have immediate insight at any level just from basic meditation of trying to watch and analyze our own mind. And if it's interesting, I would go over quickly the basics of meditation. I mean, you do basic meditation?
Not too much. No, my meditation is usually exercise. That's when I tune out or whatever.
Well, it could be related, but saying the first form of meditation usually comes, you have to stop your mind. You have to, saying there's a voice or activity in the mind, that the first thing a person needs to do is quiet the mind. And once the mind has been quieted, saying like, okay, there's thoughts and desires arising constantly in my mind, memories, all sorts of things that we call like the voice or the stage of our head. So the first step of meditation, which could be like exercise or something like that flow feeling of quieting your mind where you're completely in the moment and you're not thinking anything, you're just in the moment. And once you've accomplished that, you could observe your own mind. So, okay, my mind has been quieted. And so, what's the first thing that disturbs the mind when it's no longer quiet? And so, it could be a memory, could be a desire, could be a thought. And then you just examine that, okay, my mind was quiet and my mind became unquiet, and it became unquieted by this desire, this memory, or this thought, uh, or this perception coming to my head, and then trying to do some sort of self analysis. And if you've done meditation for a period of time, you could basically develop an internal observer. So, like multiple personalities in the head. If you know basic Freudian psychoanalysis, like id, superego, id, ego, and super ego, but that you're constantly monitoring your own mind. So, I am me, the controller of the physical body. I am whatever it is that's putting these thoughts, desires, memories, perceptions into my mind. And then there's an external observer that's observing my own mind and analyzing what does it mean that my mind is forwarding these things to the forefront. If so if that makes sense. So as to the basics of meditation, first you have to be able to quiet your mind. Then you have to be able to observe your mind, and then you have to have somewhat this abstract observer that observes the mind and analyzes the mind at the same time. That means, what does it mean that my mind is doing these things? And so the creation of the separate observer is called like an advanced meditation technique that could even take a few years. But if you do a few years of meditation, um, you could generally create this external observer of the mind and keep that the rest of your life, as long as you do a regular meditation. That's also the precursor to self-improvement. So if you talk like laughter and you take a pejorative view on it, or just general impulse control, it's like, okay, my mind right now is giving me bad advice. And it's like a Hindu type view. It seems like your mind is kind of like our enemy, because your mind is constantly telling us bad advice, putting desires in our head, trying to get us to do things that are wrong. And so if you have this external observer that's like, okay, um, here's the sense perception, and here's my mind incorrectly responding to the sense perception, but because of some higher order rules and observation of my mind, I'm not acting upon my mind. And so, well, like, God forbid, if you want to put it like in a crude way, um, like you see something sexually arousing. So the mind could be, on the most crude animalistic way, to some extent, the mind is saying rape, or like someone upsets you and it's saying that could be violence, like murder, or you see a possession that's not yours and say steal. And so like everybody understands, like, okay, there's punishment, there's law and order. So if I see something that I want that's not mine, I can't just take it, because there's going to be some sort of consequence to my action. But even just indulging on thought, so if it's a perception, like sexual desires, so like, okay, sexual desires arousing in my head right now, so you're going to indulge, maintain the thought that comes to your mind and indulge in it. And then that could cause an increase in semen content or masturbation or something like that from indulging in it. But just a basic level of mind control, that, okay, the desire popped into my head, and I was aware that the desire popped into my head, and through self-control I was able to quiet my mind and then allow something else to enter my mind. And sometimes you can't control it. You're saying the same thought keeps arising in your head again and again, And it could be like anger, jealousy, hatred, saying like, oh man, like this person really got the better of me. It sucks. I hate it. And like, no matter what you do for like days or weeks or years, like a Freudian subconscious thing is always coming to, like the Chris Rock, that kid who beat you up in third grade. It's like, oh man, like I can't believe that kid beat me up in third grade. It still bothers me. But like an observation of the mind that comes to a person's head to understand what is that entering my head, and a higher level of say that I am the controller of my mind. You may not be able to control your desires. You may not be able to control your thoughts, but you could quiet your mind. You could observe your mind. You could analyze yourself, and then possibly go through a process. So I mean that's basic meditation. Whether you're a believer or an atheist, saying even if you don't believe in the soul or you think mind comes from the brain, that these meditation techniques are basically universal, and they've been largely proven that these techniques of quieting the mind, observing the mind, or gaining a higher level of control of the mind are pretty demonstrated and proven techniques.
So anyway, I guess I'll do my week in review. And my notes are just gone, so apologies that this is probably going to be far from complete.
Okay,
Welcome
I'm listening.
back,
I'm gonna step up for a second, but I'm listening.
Sweet. All right, well, I've been getting into some interesting conversations and having fun talks. Hit some impasse. Thank God in a way that it's happening sooner than later, because with the dumbasses, the fans of the show have been around for a while, like Con-Ups and She Who Shan't Be Named. It took me a really long time to figure out what the heck was going on there, but now that I've had the chance to be training my algo on all this infinity fountain of dipshit antics, I can identify the problems real quickly, which sort of perhaps culminate in an anecdote about entity whose name I won't mention, but wanted to debate about the identity of indiscernibles on a general principle. So this is a definition from Leibniz monadology, which I've not looked into. I barely know anything about Leibniz other than he is one of the two people credited with the invention of what is now called calculus, aka integral differential calculus, what used to be called fluxions. I don't even know. This guy wanted to debate about a definition, essentially. So it's like missing the point, right? I don't know if it's obvious as to why debating about a definition is stupid if you don't actually have a topic to debate. Because it's just really, I mean, what's your standard of judgment? Sort of hanging there. Like, I can understand a definition for a particular implementation. You got to make sure it's the right one. But just generally, whether defining two things as indiscernible by a list of criteria is like, you cannot really argue about that on its merits in any sort of, almost seems like a sans axiom way people are alluding to even be able to reason within. Nothing is, it's mind-boggling that somebody can make this category error, but essentially arguing over a metaphysical thing when metaphysics is what instantiates proofs, when you think you're going to prove a definition wrong without having an actual usage for the definition. I hope it's clear why that's insanity. What do you think, Krabby? Did you follow what I just said, or is it just gibberish and gobbledygook? As so many would.
In Greek is logomachy, and it was looked down upon. I mean, yet you're right. Arguing over definitions is the ultimate waste of time. You're trying to, I mean, words are blunt objects, right?
You have to argue over definitions if you're going to have a debate and make sure you're using the same. Well, if you don't agree on definitions, you have to sort that out before the debate, though. So to say
Maybe,
that's
but
overly
it
pedantic, I
doesn't
think is
matter
also
what word
errant.
you use.
It
You can
does
just
matter
create a
what
new
words you
word.
use. You can't establish that
make
you're
a new word.
coherently conveying information, even if you're using the same word. So any word that goes into an abstract domain, you have to confirm you're referring to the same thing.
Sure,
That's
but
a
you could
different
just
issue.
create
But
a new word, a wholly new word. It doesn't really
wow,
matter what the word,
it does
is.
matter though.
If they have a misconception, just let them have that and move on to a new concept. That's what I like
Are
to
you
do.
like the Swami or something on this channel?
I
I
mean,
mean,
I'll
am I
take
in
that.
some sort
That's
of
your words.
voodoo? Am I in some? It's actions, right? So this is again the importance of metaphysics. It's like you can say that you don't want to have Brahmanism, but when you say that, you're effectively taking the role of a Brahmin. So it's like words matter, but usage matters more. That's why metaphysics is prior to physics. So again, coming back to these debates, people are way too focused on finding inconsistencies in people's reasoning. That is not a sufficient cause for anything except for huffing your own farts. That is what floats your boat, which is kind of boring. Non-contradictory, I put a question and nobody acknowledged it. Now, I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but I'm going to put it up again and I'm going to continue to bring it up until I get an answer, because that's the kind of person I am. So not very complicated. I couldn't get a straight answer on this. And it's like, well, it should be obvious what the answer is, because it's like implied is either as strong or as an axiom or it isn't, and you have to be able to say why. And if you can't, you're in some serious trouble. So first of all, actually knowing what it is that you're referring to when you use words, that's a good start. Non-contradictory, that's something, but you got to understand why that's a problem before you just start asserting it everywhere as being like this governing principle, which is, what the Socratic method sort of comes to embody to some extent. You want something transcendent. You want something with error tolerance. You want something with predictive precision, complete, coherent, all these conditionals that have nothing to do with contradictions. Obviously, you can't have stuff contradicting other stuff on certain levels, because you want to be able to tell truth from non-truth. That was the whole point of my article, which I don't feel enough people have read, as for some reason a bunch of traffic is being driven to my blog of the one article I put there as a fake article, troll article, to prove a point, a meta point. And I'm very disappointed that now that point's being proven. So that I won't talk too much more about that, but yeah, there. Let's see if I got my thing. Oh, there we go. I did not understand this meme, although I do appreciate that people are trying to meme. So this is from Darth Arianis. Oh yeah, and then this one. What do you think of this meme, dude? I don't know if you can see it. It should come up in a couple seconds, but it's somebody's take on my modding of that. Krabby, I don't know if you know, but I modded not even a debate. It was like a conversation on T-Jump's channel 2 days ago. Probably not. Or possibly yesterday. I don't remember when it was. You there, Krabby?
I'm not a huge T-Jump viewer.
Okay.
I
Anyway.
enjoy his stuff, but I haven't gotten around to it. So
I mean, who has enough time to watch all of Tej's content? Has a lot of time on their hands, so it's no problem. I just thought by coincidence you might have seen it because I was on it. But it's no problem. It's no problem. Yeah, I went to this one already. I did another diagram because people keep coming to this troll asshole dickhead question of, well, you can't say what it means to be a human. It's like, who cares? Did that matter at any point? To what extent did that matter? It's like wording matters. So intentions matter. So if you're trying to use a technique to undermine the foundation, i.e. using logic to deny morality, when historically logic has always been used for morality, because morality is track, discernment, right? So can try to do that, but it defeats the purpose, and then it's sort of nobody's interested. But anyway, to get an answer as to what a life form, you got to, if you want to say what a human is, technically, you got to say what a life form is, and you got to say all this other stuff. But broad strokes, animals are going to have this hyperbolic figure eight knot complement encompassing their body, and you can tell it's by a mouth and an opening on the other end, whatever you want to call that. That's the minimum. Go ahead, Krabby.
I would call it a hyperboloid, but what's the difference?
Well, it's not a hyperboloid. So it's a specific topological figure that I had absolutely nothing to do with deriving, that somebody else made a discovery with that I'm now applying. It's a 3+1 dimensional geodesic. You can compare that with the sphere, which is a 3-dimensional geodesic.
Doesn't a hyperboloid just seem different, or a donut, you could say? Doesn't a donut just seem more simple?
Well, it's not about what I think is simple. It's about what's accurate. You ever heard the quote, I think it's from Albert Einstein, of things should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler? Do you agree with that maxim?
I mean, no, I think as a monist, I think things are divinely simple. I think things can't get simpler. I think the only way that things could manifest is how they have.
No, it's a teaching philosophy. It's when you know how complicated something is and you want to bring it down to a, general audience. If you bring it down too far, you lose the sense of what it originally meant. So you've got people running around thinking they understand a concept when really they're just sort of latching on to some facet of it.
I guess that's just sort of a thing with like quantum or particle physics, is that it does, maybe it's just incentivized to have all of this like complication, because the more complication, the more competition you can have, and the more you can flex that your university has made this kind of discovery. Because without all of these complications, you can't be making discoveries every week, every month, like all of these new particles and bosons and things that keep being discovered. Maybe that's just my bias kind of against particle physics. But I think maybe I misunderstood the figure eight, the 3+1. Say it again. What? The hyperboloid seems simple to me, and seems, geometrically basic in that, like, all.
Right. So you're thinking you get a vote in the mind of God. Why?
I'm Wonder Crab.
Yeah, I know Victoria's kind of laughing at me for saying general audience. Believe it or not,
that's Jennifer's
I
way of
actually
saying
am.
you think your opinion matters. Hinting like, no, your opinion does not, in fact, matter. I'm sorry. Like, I know you have one. I know it's important to you, but in the scheme of things, your opinion is not important.
Well, opinions kind of shape the whole surface, don't they? Imposing your opinion on people is like the whole point of politics,
The
right?
way to make your opinion matter is to have it have harmonic resonance with the truth.
Do you think the opinions that matter today have harmonic resonance with the truth? Do you think that they're in alignment?
The only opinions that have ever mattered have had harmonic resonance with truth.
Mattered, maybe to you, but to the people, to the greater lens of society, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah, so back to this diagram, Effluent's asking water bear. Yeah, I think that's one of the names for them. Now I forgot, the other name has slipped my mind. Tardigrades. They're little cutie pies. Apparently they've been observed on the moon or in space or something. Like, I don't know. It could just be some dirt on the the observation device, right? So, but anyway, they're probably one of the most simple, recognizable animal forms, and trying to show how the original light field is going to bend, and you're going to get these not predictable forms, but you can understand their symmetries a little bit better because you have 3+1, and that's the one shape, and then that shape within whatever is available to the organism can continue on, because remember, it's 3+1 per order of magnitude, which we don't always have every order of magnitude operating in a given organism. Probably only a couple, maybe 3. I haven't done all the calculations myself. The point that I'm at right now is to draw broad strokes comparisons to make it easier to see mechanically what's going on, and ultimately accounting for how is it that the body is able to move all at once, having a unified potential and not being like a bunch of disjoint, clunky, nonsensical, robotic, for lack of a better word, and also accounting for things like peacocks having all that neat color variation in their feathers. How do we get that much multiplicity of or variety? I don't know exactly how to word it, but if you could see how, if you start with the basic shape, which again here, this shape is not really what it looks like in reality. It's basically completely solid, except it's not. It's transparent but solid, quote unquote, but it's actually hyperfluid. But anyway, it's a geometry that can be deformed, and deform it to match up with the whole body. And then you can see how in yoga they call body the covering of the soul made of food. And this hyperbolic figure eight's been distorted fifth body would be one of the harmonics of the soul or whatnot. Obviously, there's way more because you get an HF8 prime or whatever we're going to be calling them, because that seems somewhat wordy. It's a very simple, you could argue it's like most simple pump in existence. And so you're going to find those all over the place, like in ears and stuff. You can check out my article if you want to learn more about that. One of the last few. Yeah, second to last article. I think that's about it. Does anyone have any idea what this is about? I didn't think I had anything in common with Hegel, but then again, I haven't read Hegel, so that concludes my week in review. Oh, and also I found 2 articles that say they found macro scale quantum effects. No big deal. More evidence, that I'm right, as if we needed it.
I shared videos on Hegel last week. I think Ben Watkins is somewhat of a Hegelian. Hegelian's thoughts on consciousness, like the stage of the mind where he tries kind of the precursors of materialism and Hegel, and also thoughts on politics, but laying the groundwork of modern philosophy for mind to arise from the physical. Yeah, how do you end up with this random modding? I mean, it's kind of weird because the guy was like a Christian. And,
it was totally unplanned.
And I guess he was like a boomer.
He was booked.
Older man.
The guy who booked him was not available to host, and nobody else was around. So I said, I could do it.
You did a pretty good job in him at the beginning. He started asking you questions in like pantheism. You sounded like you want to talk with you, and then you're like, and just talk to the audience, and then you didn't even really talk with him at all, just modding. But you did a pretty good job. And T-Jump seemed pretty calm in the sense, but like minus MTH, he was like, he could only deal with things within the Christian world frame. So only if you were able to speak on his terms. And he was more preaching, and he had a somewhat like systematic understanding of Christian theology, but not even that. He wasn't even the greatest like systematic Christian theologer. It was almost like a preacher. And since it's T-Jump, most of the people are atheist, and they wanted to debate him, and then he would refuse to talk to a person on their terms, because like he doesn't have MTH, and I guess he's like a Christian exclusionist, that this is the worldview, this is the only worldview, and to even consider discussing something within the framework of another worldview, is like heresy. Although he was relatively calm for the extremity of his belief, like he wasn't like yelling.
I couldn't believe how long he stuck around for. I was like, whoa.
And and he was, I mean, he was basically like, yeah, there is a hell, and if you don't accept like the whole deal of general Christian theology, you're going to hell. And he made clear that if you don't believe in Jesus, you can't be saved. You can't even be a good person. And then
it's like, dude, you don't have to convince me hell's real. This is it.
Yeah, then kind of like the guy who debated Adam Green was just like, the resurrection, it's true. It's the truest thing that's knowable. And like the burden of proof of you is to disprove it. But I'm only willing to use the framework of the believer because every other framework is wrong. So it was pretty circular. So I guess if you kind of wanted to like understand the mind of a Christian from a Christian framework, it was a little bit interesting. He knew his verses pretty well and the basic theology, and he was a Calvinist. But to some extent, it was, I don't know if we call it like a theology Christianity 101. Maybe it was like a 301 or something like that. But it was really just like Christianity 301. And like T-Jump, and it was relatively tame, like as opposed to the pop on, where you get some real like death threats and trash talking, and like all the like a full Jerry Springer. That this was relatively calm, although the intensity of what he was saying, like he was basically saying the full scale, accept Jesus or you're going to hell, and if you're not willing to talk in the framework, that he's not even willing to talk to you, and he's praying to save you. So it was kind of weird to have you and T-Jump so calm in modding that, like.
Well, there's a whole culture on Discord,
Well, maybe this is like interfaith or something like that, but it wasn't even like interfaith, because it was somewhat like he was more preaching.
It was an AMA. That's what it was.
So I guess maybe he's a big name. Maybe people know who he is, and so there were a lot of people who wanted to talk to him, but it wasn't. And then it was really people wanted to like debate him, but he didn't really seem to be able to do that or want to do that. And so every time someone tried to get into some sort of debate, and then T-Jump kind of like protected him, from that, and then you were just like next. So like it was just like friendly questions where you explain Christianity, and that's it. So like God forbid, kind of like Hindu gurus are like that, rabbis are like that. Like any questions, and like the question is like, I am the authority, and now I will explain to you the mind of God. And any questions that don't accept my authority aren't real questions. And almost all the questions were just like, dude, like, I don't believe you're not authority. And then you and T-Jump were like, next questioner.
Well, I mean, there were a lot of people that wanted to come up, and at some point, I don't know, it was probably somewhere between 2.5 hours to 3 hours and 45 minutes into it. I'm like, how the hell long? How much gas does this guy have in the tank type thing? And then if a bunch of people just showed up, asking questions. So it did go on for quite some time. It went on until his headphones died, because then it kept on going after Tej stopped the stream and had to go to sleep and everything else. So.
Well, I mean, he's a preacher. I mean, he do it 3 hours. Like I mean, we do Week in Review, for like hours every week. Like I did Politically Provoked. I mean, I wasn't talking most of the time. There was other people, and those people were loudmouths. But like I was there for over 5 hours. I could do, but like, yeah, a lot of rabbis, a lot of Hindus, a lot of Christians. Like, no, they could do hours and hours, and that's kind of your like why you want to become guru, why you want to become rabbi. Once you get at the front of the platform, you just sit there and deal all the questions and all the people coming to you one after the other. And to some extent, a good religious leader has to stay there until the last person's finished with their questions. Like almost all good religious leaders will find a way. I've seen this many times. Like in fact, in Brooklyn, even Amma, like Mother Amma, who comes to Detroit and gives a hug to
The
anybody.
smiling guru?
The hugging guru Amma from Kerala,
Ah, yes. The
who does
hugging
hugs,
guru.
and she's hugged
I
like
got it
30 million
wrong.
people. You hugged Amma? Did you say you hugged Amma, Jen?
No. I thought she was the. Never mind. Carry on. Hello, Chetan.
But I'm saying she actually will hug Shalom Raja. So I'm not sure if he's familiar with Amma, but I'm saying like she'll hug everybody until the line goes down, and she'll start at like usually at night, like 10 at night, and she'll go to like 8 in the morning. And sometimes she even goes like 24, 30 hours. Like the line in India, sometimes like 30,000 people, and she'll go for like 30 hours until the line is done. In Brooklyn, Israel, usually have handshaking ceremonies, or sometimes people hand out money or give food or something, wine, but usually just handshakes. And most rabbis will do handshakes until the line is done. And so in Israel, you have whole processions and aides and assistants and big buildings, and there'll be 10,000 people. I've assisted rabbis like that. I've done that, certain times where like I've shaken hundreds of hands, like I mentioned at the conventions, like the trade shows. But we're talking where there's one person, they're accepted like as some sort of guru leader, and everyone gets a chance to ask their question. Their real deal guru, they're going to be there till all the questions are done. And so it's like, no, that's pretty normal. So it's saying that the guy's a Christian, the guy's real deal. He didn't tire. He would have done it till the questions ran out.
In your worldview, why do you think, or maybe you disagree, that these kind of Bakken events or laughter or joy or love, do you think why do they give us like physically more energy? Because that's, I think, an observation that is uniform, that when people are in these states, they literally can, tap into this fuel that normally would be like impossible. Normally, if you were uninspired, trying to sit down and do anything for 3 hours is like, it's just taxing.
Well, I mean, okay, the relation to laughter, that laughter is a cognitive form of cognitive dissonance of a mismatch between perception and reality. That a person laughs because they're suffering some sort of dissonance between perception and reality. So like a good joke works on that dissonance. I said last week, like the good math joke of an infinite amount of mathematicians walk into the bar, and the first one says, give me a glass of beer. And the second one says, give me half a glass of beer. And the third one says, give me a quarter glass of beer, and so on and so on. And the bartender puts 2 glasses of beer on the bar and says, know your limits. So I mean, that's kind of like a corny math teacher joke. And it might take you a second to think about it. Because it's Zeno's paradox in the form of a bar joke. But just a simple setting up expectation, and then some sort of mismatch between perception, expectation, and result that causes laughter. Sometimes just a simple pun or wordplay, like good old Arthur Benjamin 2358. Who do we appreciate? Fibonacci. So some sort of wordplay that might make sense to you, but it doesn't match your expectation. Or like everyone knows the 2468 chant, and so you do 2358. Who do we appreciate? It's always that Fibonacci that it could it's a mismatch of expectation and reality that causes a form of humor. And say usually it's in the form of negativity, like straight up physical slapstick humor, like or laughing at bad things happening to people, like World Star Hip Hop or something, like seeing someone have a horrendous injury and laughing, and to put like a pejorative, like a good or bad, but it's a form of um, dissonance and a mismatch of perception and reality, and it's constant because people's understanding of reality is usually imperfect, or say it's always imperfect. So there's always a discrepancy between our expectation and reality, and so you have these constant states of dissonance.
Why do these? I mean, maybe I should just reframe it and leave out laughing, because I understand, I think, a little bit more now your position on laughter. But you mentioned chanting. Why do these kind of events, or whatever you're into, it could be magnets, it could be a magnet convention, right? I like magnets. Magnets are very fun to play with. But why do these give you, or if you're a Christian doing a sermon, why does this kind of well, I guess, why do they
Well, it's
give
like
you,
the
why
guru
do
has
you
the least amount of dissonance. So when you go to the event, if it's a convention, if it's magnets or whatever, and there's the expert, and so the expert has the least amount of dissonance of anybody there. So even if the expert doesn't have the answer to your question, the expert has a better understanding towards the answer of your question than you do. And so that extent, the reason why the guru or the expert is at the front of the room and could stand there till all of the questions have been exhausted is because they're the expert. And uh, and, and so basically the expert helps you resolve your dissonance. So all of us have our mismatches between perception and reality, and the dissonance may not always be there, and so it comes in the form of a question. It's like, master, why is this the case? Why is my understanding of this concept a mismatch to the reality of how things actually work? And the master is the master because they have a superior understanding and less of a mismatch of reality in their perception, and could help clarify that perception. And you say you become the guru when you have better perception than the whole audience, and you could sit there and clarify everybody's dissonance one after the next without the other person's so like you might know things. There might be certain aspects of the world where I have a larger mismatch between my perception and reality than you do, even though, let's say, relatively, I'm the master who has a closer understanding of reality with my perception. That my perception closer matches reality than you, but there's going to be certain aspects where your perception has a closer match to reality than even the master. But the certain level of expertise where they're still on the greater platform, that it makes sense to them that you're coming to them with questions, generally because they've avowed themselves to a process, that they've studied under a master themselves and went through the process, and now they understand what it means to be a master, because at one point they were a student in front of a master. And even if you come with a question that they don't have an answer to, that it's still going to be them helping resolve your dissonance in that perspective. And on a group level, that works also. So it's not just teacher student, but teacher students, where there's some sort of group dissonance reduction. And so a certain level, if you're understanding what's happening in terms of like group think, group cognition, that you have individual cognitive dissonance related to humor, because I said humor is a form of cognitive dissonance. People laugh because there's a mismatch between expectation and perception, to some sort of group dissonance, where the group has a mismatch between individually, that collectively each individual in the group has a mismatch between their perception and reality, and that one single person's perception of reality could help relieve the dissonance of the whole group.
Well, then I have a request. As you are the relative master
That could be on any level.
economically.
You're saying that that could be on any given
Yeah,
subject, any convention, any.
economically, certainly. This is a question I had. I gotta go, so this is gonna be my last question because I'm running out of battery and I don't even have anywhere to charge my phone right now. I'll have to go somewhere. But as the relative economic master, do you have any advice, hypothetically, if you were, rock bottom, you didn't have a place to stay yet, and your job did not pay enough? What's some tips or relieve my dissonance?
Well, okay, I mean, there's, as I said, like the country boy for high IQ, and saying, I mentioned high or low birth, and saying, okay, you have the immediate reality where everybody has needs that need to be met, and then you need resources to meet those needs. And so to say, maybe you took high birth but don't have good relations with your parents, but so to say you're in a low birth situation where the resources are not just being placed in front of you, like your parents aren't just handing you a check to make your life easy, and so you have to work or you have to do the bare minimum. So like I remember I was in Jerusalem and I used to eat in a soup kitchen because I was a student and my parents had kind of cut me off because they didn't want me to keep studying theology in Israel and when we come back to America. So they stopped economically providing for me. And I even slept on benches and ate in, soup kitchens or ate very little. I remember, a Hasidic man telling me, eat in the soup kitchen so you have more time to study, that it doesn't pay to work. You could sleep on a bench and eat in a soup, eat free food in order that you could use your valuable time to study as opposed to, working in order that you could buy your own food and shelters. I mean, you could have a situation depending on what you're doing with your time, but like generally you have to work and there's the high low birth factor of what's available to you that do you really have to take a low level job where you have to do crap work all day, uh, like 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, just so that you could buy food and have minimal shelter. And it seems like it's an endless cycle that you're slaving just to meet your basic needs. That so you look at skill acquisition, and you could be intelligent about minimalism. That how much do you really need, and you don't want to take bad advice or put yourself in risk. But it's like, okay, like you could sleep outside or be without an apartment. You could couch surf, you could eat meals, or you don't want to affect your health, and you probably need good advisement. But if you're in a situation where there's a whole bunch of things you want to accomplish and you don't want to do some crap job just to meet your minimal life uh, subsistence, you might consider largely renouncing and being meager. Sometimes there's methods of being useful to your wealthy friends. Maybe there's a person like Doooovid who has a house and extra rooms and extra resources that it's not that much sweat off my back to like let you crash on my couch or feed you. And there's people like that all over. And God forbid, you don't want to be like turning tricks for a dirty old man or something like that. But sometimes there could be a value proposition where you're a good guest and could do something useful for someone who, so to say, has more resources at the time, or took higher birth. Someone that has a rich dad and therefore just has a whole bunch of resources more than they need, and for whatever reason, because they like your company or because you do useful things for them, um, will share their resources for you. So there's all sorts of methods. You could turn to religion, sleep inside a church or ashram, there, like public services. But yeah, you want to understand reality and you have to understand life, saying like chances are like, if you took low birth, that's not going to change. Like if your parents aren't millionaires, it's unlikely your parents are going to become millionaires and all of a sudden, give you a big check. Um, so if you don't have any money and you don't have any reasonable expectation that money's coming to you, um, you should, you're young, you have to think about how you're going to make a living, how to make a livelihood, and there's things you could think about in terms of what could you do to spend the least amount of time working to make the most amount of money. And I mean, we could talk about it. You come on Week in Review, there's a whole bunch of things at all different forms of levels. Like, okay, if you don't have an apartment and you're surfing on couches, you're gonna have a hard time being a merchant and buying a whole bunch of stuff to sell. Or like, God forbid, like start dealing drugs or something because you could carry them with you. You risk arrest. But you might be able to get a real estate license, or like even like a small level certification where you could do something commission based or one time based where you make a decent amount of money, like real estate appraisals or something. You take a 3-month course, apprentice under somebody, and then you do an appraisal and you make $100. Takes a few hours. So there's all sorts of things like learning to code, all sorts of skills that you could acquire that so that like a time efficiency where you could make a larger sum of money with a limited amount of time. So, I mean, we could talk about this more at length, uh, moving forward, and then you should usually match it to your skill set. If there's certain things that come easy to you that don't come easy to others, like fixing computers. I always had a lot of success with teaching people how to use computers. Sometimes, a lot of times, it was with Hasidic Jews, but things like getting people onto the internet so that they could buy things. In the beginning, when I was first in Brooklyn, I helped people buy like airline tickets. People like help log them onto the internet so that they could buy something, and then they might pay me like $20 for like half an hour's work, and it was worth them paying me $20 for half an hour's work because I saved them a few $100s. Um, but so you have to put yourself in a situation, so it's networking, that you have a useful skill. Say most specifically, a lot of times they're computer related, but they could be all sorts of things like plumbing or cleaning or cooking. If you're a good cook, someone might allow you to stay in their house and eat, and even give you a little bit of money if you cook for them. So all types of things, whatever meets your propensity and skill level, and then the networking necessary to have the people with more resources than you that you're going to share your skill with in order to get the resources that you need. I don't know if that makes basic sense to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot to take from that. I'm gonna have to.
And so
I'm
I
gonna
did
have
that for
to
years.
go.
I lived meagerly for years, even like sleeping on benches and eating in soup kitchens, to doing one-off tasks, car service. If you get a car, sometimes driving, like Uber. These days you do Uber or Lyft, but like I did that for years, where I just did random one-off things in the minimal. Like Doowovid was always a minimalist, where I basically did the minimal amount of work to provide the material needs that I needed, that I could continue with my research or studies.
I like the real estate license idea. That's probably very, very good advice. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, David. Once again, I have to go tonight, but it's been a blast. It's been real and good. Good
Thanks for
luck with
popping in.
all.
I guess you can check out how you like sounded, and if it's good enough
Yeah,
for
I'm
future
sorry about
appearances.
this.
You were
I'm just
definitely
using my
audible though.
phone.
No, I don't think you were that bad, but you'll be able to re-listen to it later. Thanks for popping
That's
on.
fine. If you're just coming in from a phone, that's fine. And saying like, I said, like you need thousands of dollars to get a computer and sound equipment. I mean, you can
I
still pop
have a
in.
computer. I just don't have a place to plug it in. I've been plugging it in to edit uh, at an office building, but at the time we live stream, everybody's still there, so it's not really an option.
There's also, say luck or providence, if you're a believer in higher forces, that economically a lot of things are providence. Like, you could just networking, you could all of a sudden like meet a friend that has the value proposition, that, whatever reason, there's some sort of value proposition that favors you. And a lot of times it's providence. Like if you had the real estate license and you need the deal, like most of it's networking. And networking, you do the right thing, go to the conventions, do the people, go to the networking events, but it's really providence. And so you could think about that from a spiritual level, or if you pray, talk to God in your own words and try to like decipher what does God want from you. And a lot of times if you believe like that providence will work things out on their own.
All righty. Well, thank you. And good night, everybody. Good night to the chat.
Awesome. I thought it was a good opportunity to go on there and just show how impartial I can be, because people seem to think I somehow, I don't know how this idea got out there, but that I'm unreasonable.
Well, I told you that. I mean, you should be a debate coach. You should mod debates, and you should just help people out to, like create good karma by, just helping, like a public debate coach. I was even mentioning, like, why is Doovid Norvin's debate coach? And just because, like, Doovid's a teacher. Doovid basically teaches whoever shows up, and like whatever sensical that made up, like Norvin's the one who showed up. Norvin's the one who showed up. I taught him. Yeah, I mean, that's generally how you create good karma. So I mean, I'm pretty sure that I recommended that to you on Week in Review, that you mod debates or become a debate coach.
I did offer to do that a while ago, and I guess I got the opportunity
I mentioned you in the
dropped in my lap because no one else showed up. So, yay!
Well, you believe in providence. I mean, providence works in its way. Like everything is communication from God in the material realm. Like the networking, who you meet. So I did mention you on Politically Provoked in their Discord that my friend Church of Entropy, and I said the topics that you debate are evolution, pantheism, reincarnation, and Aryan invasion theory. Those are the 4 things I listed: Aryan invasion theory, evolution, reincarnation, and pantheism.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. It seems pretty accurate.
I
It's
mean, you
funny.
could probably debate
Remember all
other
those
topics.
people that used to challenge me to those Aryan invasion theory debates, and nobody ever actually followed through on any of those. What a shock.
Well, interesting that, I mean, because Norvin was the one who hooked me up, and saying that's karma. Because, like, I didn't want to be Norvin's debate coach. It was just random that, like, he was the one who constantly showed up, with Brundlefly and even my Ask the Rabbi streams. And like the Babs cast, we're kind of like a cross network on the Babs cast between Norvin and his streams. And then Norvin would be the guy who, got him Politically Provoked and mentioned me. So I was saying that there's a certain providential network that, look, I did a good deed, I helped Norvin out. And then even though me and Norvin are basically pure straight opposition, that he still returned the favor and hooked me up on Politically Provoked. And so karma works like that, saying like that's why I mentioned dualism and spiritualism with Ben Watkins or Gandalf, and he didn't seem to get it. But I said, like, karmatic events have a scoring that's not in the material realm, that if you do, as the Buddhist expression, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, doesn't make a sound. To karmatically, if you do a good deed and there's no witnesses or no way for the person you did a good deed to pay you back, do you get paid back? And say, yes, I do believe in karma, that if there's someone in need and you're never going to see them again and you still help them out, even though you're never going to see them again, there's no way they're ever going to pay you back, that there is a God who runs the world, and or just like the karma is factual, and karma is a factual science, and it does balance out, because that's just a factual science of the spiritual realm. That's how you create good karma is just by doing good deeds. And so you want to boost yourself, help out others. That, okay, like, you want to increase your profile streaming, start just helping out other streamers, and it creates good karma. And sometimes it's sensical, like something that everyone could see. There's even evidence, like, okay, like Norvin for whatever reason decides to hook Doovid up with a spot on Politically Provoked, and then you could be like, well, Doovid was pretty nice to Norvin a few years ago, so so it's sensical to anyone who sees that, kind of like what comes around goes around, that you're nice to somebody and then they come back and are nice to you later, that that's just basic karma. Like, you can say, like, of course, But a lot of times it's not in a way that you could explain it, like saying that God's ways or the world of karma, the spiritual interaction, the spiritual material realm, is usually beyond the understanding of humans. It's not in a way that you could explain, like, oh, I was nice to this guy, and then a few
Well, there's
years later, things.
models, but they become extremely obscure, mystical, and the risk reward perspective or proportion shifts dramatically.
But I studied in Israel, and like as a guru, yeah, I mean it is basically straightforward. Like, okay, like you're a rabbi in Israel, and you teach students, and over the years your students develop and come into powerful positions, and then next thing you know, you travel the world and raise money and speak to big crowds, and your students have achieved positions of power, and so that's a general model for anybody, like even like a professor, a business person, that you teach you teach people some sort of skill, and then they accomplish the skill, and then they come back, and if it's pyramidal, not to say like, okay, I helped you out, now you're going to help me out, to say like, I didn't teach you everything, I taught you a few things, and now you learned that. You come back in a few years and you say, I still have what to teach you, and that could be on a scientific level, like I was the one who taught you algebra, and now I'm the one who's teaching you calculus, and now I'm your boss at a company, to now we're partners in the same business that we've created our own technology, and so life works on that way. Actually, I would say, and karmatically, most things are sensical like that. Say like, okay, like I went to Israel, and then I got a job working with some of the people I went to school with in Israel, and there were the people that I was friendly or nice to that ended up hooking me up, and then over the years, people that I made good network connections ended up advancing, and we worked together on bigger and bigger projects like university. I'm on LinkedIn, and I see like I have friends now that work for Apple. I mean, like not friends, but I guess we're friends on social media, but we were friendly, we were partners in classes, and now I have classmates at University of Michigan that work for the big businesses in engineering, Apple, ExxonMobil, Bechtel, uh, a lot of the big corporations, and some of Jennifer went to a good university, and was reasonably sociable network with her class. It's a reasonable expectation thing that the people from her, from her class would move on and do well, and that the network would continue, and so that's some level of
Why?
why is that the regular expectation of how things work?
Well, you're saying my class should do well because the school is good or because I'm amazing?
No, I mean, even without like anything special about you, I'm saying like, okay, you graduated with honors, but it's like, even if you were just an average student and had a C average, and just graduated, but say like, no, I mean, you
I
probably
got
had.
cum laude, so I wasn't at the very top, but
Oh, yeah, but yeah, I mean, so it's unnecessary to like, it's unnecessary for you to be awesome, but if you're awesome, especially being personable or networking. But like, no, I mean, you went to school, you had training, you got an education, and then presumably people use that education and went into a whole bunch of different fields, and you're going to keep on running into those same people over your lifetime, and they're going to advance in different fields, and you might work together with them in various capacities. So like, Doovid, University of Michigan alumni, I constantly run into, alumni of my high school, alumni of my university, some people that I personally know, went to class with, that have different functions in the professional field. And, maybe one day, like, I'll put up a building, and it'll be have a partner, an investor, and then then I'll go for permits at the government office, and or at the bank, in these various things, that there'll be people that you've dealt with in the past, and so that's just generic karma. And so you could look at it as a memory, like, okay, like there was a factual thing, like like 10 years ago or even longer, 15 years ago, Doovid was in the classroom with other people. And now those same people are different. But there was an event that like Jennifer Doovid was in the classroom with these other people, and there was a karmatic imprint. And then we went our separate ways, and then they'll reconnect, and that karmatically the imprint is there that like, oh, that's the person who we had this connection from somewhere in the past, and build upon just like streaming. Okay, like I was nice to Jennifer, she came on the Babs cast. Like Claire, like I hooked up Claire with Charles Moskowitz this week, and so kind of like Norvin. Like I try to be nice to everybody, but like yeah, I'm still being nice to Claire. I was nice to Jennifer, and me and Jennifer have relatively been working for a few years now with minimal to no friction, as opposed to maybe Claire. There's been a reasonable amount of friction, but not even that much. I'm a pretty minor conflict person, and I'm still helping Claire out. And and Claire maybe returns the favor every once in a while, and that's expectation and the mechanisms of how karma works. You don't have to understand. Like there is a phenomenon of karma, and intuits to everybody. That's what they were talking about, like Crab, and being a master, having the least amount of dissonance between expectations and reality, and to not just be like, okay, the professor or the person at the trade show who has expertise versus being like a guru, and the guru has an expertise in karma and knowing how things like karma works, to have the least amount of dissonance between expectations and reality, to where you could go into unknown circumstances. Like Doovid is going to hop on a plane and go to New Zealand, and and maybe I'm going to see people that I know, and I don't know who I'm going to see. Or like you're a guru, I'm going to Australia, the world tour, Doovid world tour 2022, Japan, China, New Zealand, Australia, Israel, London, Germany. And there's going to be people in all of those places that see me on the YouTube and are going to want to talk to me. And that's going to be an expression of my karma. And so if you're the guru, you're the one that's going to have the least dissonance of the expectation of the mismatch between perception and reality. I mean, is that how you see it?
I really don't think I see it the same way as too many people.
But I'm just talking about the basic science understanding of karma and really that to cognitive dissonance, and the guru being the person who has the least mismatch between perception and reality.
I guess.
And that would be related to like a typical progress of a person that studies under a master, that teaches, and then maybe expands and goes on tour, and then has students all over the place. That's the normal process of any person in any field, not just spiritual, like a rabbi, an imam, a priest, a Hindu, but also an engineer or a politician. That it's the same karmatic process for all of those fields.
Sure. Just a question of, what's the best service for me to do? Asylum?
Well, sometimes you don't know. So I'm saying that when you don't know, you could just, okay, I'm going to create good karma. I mean, there's some systems where you don't want to have excess karma, and you don't actually want to create good karma, because good karma, so to say, has to be balanced out. And so like if you say you don't want to take birth again, or you want to go back to Godhead from a non-reincarnation aspect, that's
not how I look at it. Is that how you look at it?
Well, how I look at it doesn't necessarily matter. I'm giving maybe like an ISKCON, certain school of Hinduism view, or even Kabbalistic, that you have to come back due to karma. So if you have excess good or bad karma, you have to come back. And having good karma, so if the goal is to get out of here, that I don't want to come back, I want to get out of here, that having good karma causes you to take higher birth. So my goal is not to come back and take higher birth. My goal is to go back to Godhead. So creating excess good karma isn't always, just like a pure objective. So I was saying, like, but generally, you're saying the creation of good karma is a good thing. I was mentioning that with chess. I was talking, just saying, like, I have hundreds of former students, chess players, that a lot of them are quite good at chess today. And in fact, all over the world, there are people that I've done, that have moved on, that I coached right here in Metro Detroit, and now are different places around the country, and also over the internet. Now I've been coaching over the internet for a few years, and so it's okay. The creation of good karma is a factual element. Like, okay, I had a skill, and I used that skill to teach other people, and I asked for nothing in return. Just like, I want to do something positive, so I'm going to give over what I have to people who want it and ask for nothing in return. And so that's the creation. Generally, that's accepted, that's a method of creating good karma, helping people out and asking for nothing in return. Like Norvin, for example, Claire, Jennifer. Like, okay, like at least to a certain level. When I first met Jennifer, Claire, Norvin, I helped them and I asked for nothing in return. It may not have been like big basic help, but it's like I was on a stream, I was nice to them, I introduced them, I gave them a little network, a little tech advice, and helped them on their way in streaming. And I didn't say that I didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't request or tell them that they're going to have to do something in the future to pay me back for what I did for
Well,
them.
that's the whole idea with what Krishna says, right? With you're entitled to your duty, but not the fruits of it.
Yes, I say that, but generally, yeah, that means a straight verse in Bhagavad Gita. But I was saying from a kind of pure science, a non-scriptural, pure technical science of karma, that's the creation of good karma, basically according to any system. When you help a person out, or large amounts of people out, and ask for nothing in return, that's an accumulation of good karma. And if you believe in the science of karma, the accumulation of good karma is somewhat like money in a bank account. It's not because I'm going to call up Norvin, or I'm going to call up Jennifer, or Claire, or somebody, or Luke, like Luke helped me out. Saying like I return. I set Luke up on Politically Provoked, but Luke, whatever case, and not that I'm going to call a person out like, oh, you remember me, Doovid? You remember that time I helped you out? Like I always mention when I day traded, that I lived with this guy who, I mean, he was pretty rich, but he was kind of like overweight and out of shape and a drug addict. And there would be basic duties in the house, or sometimes like he'd want me to like go pick up food, or go to the store, or like take out trash or something like that. And like he'd ask me like, I don't want to do that, and then he'd recount every single good thing he ever did for me. And because he was quite wealthy, he hooked me up quite a few times. And like a lot of it, God forbid, it was like drugs, but food, or just giving a person money. But he'd recount like this long list of times where he did me a favor, and I didn't do anything for him, and kind of guilt me into doing what he wanted. Like the least you could do is go to the store and get me my food. And he was even usually willing to pay for it. So it wasn't even like sending me to the to Dunkin' Donuts to get him some food and me buy for him. He was even usually willing to pay for it and to buy me food also. But even just for that, like he would go through this long list of guilting you into it, which is a certain reality of positive karma. They're going to call you up like, you owe me. You owe me. You know that I helped you out and you didn't do anything for me. Like you admit you owe me. Like I'm calling my favor in. You better help me. So I was saying that to a certain extent, but I say like no, good karma is just like it's a fact that there's a balance of karma, and not because you're going to call up the person and remind them that you helped them out and you owe them, but because there's a science of karma, and when you have an accumulation of good karma, that it has to be balanced out, and that means at some point other people are going to help you out without asking for anything in return.
It's an absolutely wonderful way to live life, because then the only thing you have is the joy of the act rather than the disappointment tinged expectations of reciprocity and so forth.
Yeah, there's
It's
two
so
things like
unusual
picking
to
up
get
hitchhikers
reciprocity.
or something, and sometimes, like, gave Gandalf the scenario, like where there's no way you're going to be paid back, and in Judaism, there's the expression chesed shel emes, which is the true kindness, which means kindness to the dead, and it's called the true kindness because the dead can't pay you back, and so like burying the dead or helping clean up the karma, bad karma of dead people, that's considered true karma, a true kindness, because the person's dead. There's zero chance that the person's ever going to be able to return the kindness. But you say no, there is a God, and there is such a fact as karma. And if bury a corpse or something, or help uh, clean the karma of a person, the bad karma of a person who's already died, that is an accumulation of good karma that factually has to be paid back, even though the person has no possibility to pay you back because they're dead. And then you have the science of reincarnation, or just generic karma of like, well, why is this person helping me? This person I've never met in this place that doesn't know anything about me and just decided to help me. And you say, well, like, I know I have an accumulation of good karma. I help people out all the time, and I'm not surprised that other people are similar to me and are willing to just help people out and expect nothing in return.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't be surprised that such people exist, but if you've never met or don't meet
Well, if
them
you're like that
anyways.
yourself, it's going to be less surprising. So if you're not like that, because like a lot of times, uh, I've been the first person to be nice to a person like that, and I've had people tell me that, like, you say, "What are you doing? You're crazy," and I say, like, "No, I'm just a nice guy, or whatever. I believe in God." But no, I mean, thank God, I've helped quite a few people out, and I've even had people openly express to me like the shock that I was helping them out. And because in all likelihood that no one in their life had ever been nice to them like that, in a sense of just helping some random person out and expecting nothing in return, even not asking their name, not asking for like anything, like some dude asks you for $20 and you give him $20. $20 isn't a small sum of money, and you're saying, like, you don't even want to know my name. It's like, no, don't worry about it, no big deal. And or, something like that. And I said, I told him, look forward, the first time in Israel, someone did, some random person just gave me $100 like that. He was like, here, kid, here's $100. And it's like, I hardly knew the guy, and he just gave me $100. $100 was a lot of money, and I was like crabby at the time. My parents had cut me off. I had no source of money or food or even a place to stay. $100 meant a lot to me, and it was just some random guy that I'd just met and decided to hook me up like that. And thank God, over the years I've done that to quite a few people. And like they had that movie Pay It Forward, but then to eventually understand the science of karma, to say not to say I'm not doing it because I expect God or karma to do me a favor, but because you just understand that that's how karma works. That originally I did it uh, to break myself, to become, I wanted to be a good person. But after a while, you're saying you become the guru. There's less of a mismatch between dissonance, between perception and reality, and the understanding of how karma works. So I said that, yeah, that if you've helped out a lot of people and never asked for anything in return, you may not be surprised that there's a whole bunch of people that act like that, as opposed, and God forbid, Cultural Thug was saying like that on his, I mean, God forbid about Hitler, but he's saying just that he never cared about anybody other than himself. And then he saw this person who cared so much about his race and his people. So just that aspect, like, like from the day I've been born till today, I've been completely selfish. I've never cared about anybody other than myself, let alone to start caring about your nation or your people or just some complete stranger or for some other group. And God forbid, there's a lot of people that you'll meet that from the day they were born till today have basically been selfish. From the day they were born till today, They've largely only cared about themselves. They've never really done something for somebody else without the expectation of having something done in return. And you might even be able to divide the world into percentages. That maybe 25% of the world basically is pretty selfish and goes through a large portion of their life um, only concerned about themselves. And so as I said, if you're a nice guy, um, it happens to you quite regularly that people will be shocked that you're so nice because they've never been nice to anybody like that. So they think you're trying to trick them. It's like, I would have helped somebody out without the expectation of return. What are you doing? Like, how are you trying to trick me? It's like, dude, I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just a nice guy. I believe in God. And the person's like, no, like, I don't believe you. Like, you have to be trying to trick me somehow because from my own perception of, because me in my life has been selfish. And the only things I've ever done for other people was when I expected something in return. I can't understand that you would be doing something nice to me without the expectation of something good in return.
Yeah, now that you mention it, my life has been pretty much nonstop people distrusting me for that reason.
Well, I mean, so I explained, like the lack of the expectation and dissonance, where it's not surprising to you that I mean, I've told you the story many times of the rabbi who really helps a person out, and then gives them a small bag of rocks, and he says, "What's this for?" It's like, "For you to throw at me." He's like, "Why do I need a bag of rocks to throw at you?" Because and there's actually a verse. It's like, usually when you help a person out, they return it by throwing rocks at you. So I'm giving you a bag of small rocks, so that please throw these small rocks at me instead of big rocks. But to say, like, no, I mean, unfortunately, karma's like that, and not only the world is such a cold place that most people have never done anything for another person without the expectation of being in return, that people actually reward kindness with pain. And
Well,
so they say,
pain
like,
is
the
not
Jesus
quite, I wouldn't use the term pain. I would say maybe rejection or punish it.
Yes, I mean, that's like the Jesus principle, in the sense, I mean, you could learn it from other traditions, but I put that the Jesus principle of suffering on other behalfs, kind of like the Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. I guess the guy on the T Jump stream talking about God came and died for our sins, and saying, like, well, God was here to help us, and we repaid him by stringing him up and crucifying and torturing him to death. And so, the Jesus principle is probably the most well-known example of that principle of paying kindness with um, punishment, and to even expect it, and then the level of righteousness is to accept it. Yes, I helped this person. Yes, this person hurt me in return for helping them, and no, I'm not upset at them for returning my kindness with hate.
Nice. Would be
There's
nice to always
parallels
have
in
that much patience.
Judaism and Krishna and Hinduism and all over. But I say, like, the Jesus principle is probably the best or most well-known example of that.
I'd say that's fair enough.
And I agree with Claire. Like, certainly I'm not a Jesus believer, but like, I accept the essential Jesus principle as something positive, as a lesson that, yes, you could suffer on behalf of others, you could do good for others. And I know my rabbi, said, like, God forbid, like, we're Jews, we don't turn the other cheek. Like, it's like, I've heard that probably over 100 times in my life. But saying, like, we're Jews here, like, we're not Christians, we don't turn the other cheek. But there is such a concept as the Jesus principle, and even in Judaism, there's concepts of that principle. But then there's also kind of the element, like, no, like, we're Jews here, we don't turn the other cheek. Like, that's not our belief system. It's not a venerable thing.
It's a Christian thing, pretty much exclusively, isn't it?
Well, I mean, saying that you're saying that, I'm saying the rabbi's saying it's not even a good thing. Like it's kind of just dumb and self-defeating. It doesn't help you or the other person.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends what your level of, commitment is for whatever it is that you're doing. I think most people don't really know why they do the things that they do.
I mean, on your debate in the theology, does it make sense that the deity, like I did in my diagram, the deity, the ruler of both the material and the spiritual realm, would come into the material realm, take material form, and save the world through being tortured to death and crucified and resurrection? And so, the T jump's like, no, that's absurd. It's nonsensical. I don't buy it. And so, if you're like Adam Green or something, like, I don't reject the spiritual realm. I don't reject God. He just rejects Christianity, that it's absurd. Like what is the president of the local Hare Krishna temple, who's always, I guess, deals with a lot of Christian ministers, and because I'm a Jew, he's always, I don't call him like bashing Christianity, but he's always theologically critiquing Christianity. And he's like, God does not die. It's not possible. God does not die. And so from a certain level, like as a lot of Hindus say, like no, like God does not die. Like it can't be Jesus. There's no way that God came and died. It's impossible.
Well, I mean, is the story that Jesus died, or no, he'd be back in heaven?
You can understand it a certain way, but I just think that a lot of Hindus, to a Jew, it's nonsensical. Like they're just a non-starter. Like Jesus came and was crucified, and that's God. It is nonsensical. It's impossible. It can't even be taken seriously. And such, so just mentioning, my friend at the local Hare Krishna temple, Braj Kumar, who said God does not die. Just like it's nonsensical. Like it doesn't even make sense to him. Christians preach to him. He's like, God does not die. Like it's nonsensical. Like, please, like, no.
Wasn't Krishna killed in the Gita?
Well, I mean, Krishna eventually dies, not in the Gita. I mean, in the Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita doesn't include Krishna's death, but Krishna eventually leaves material form. I forget exactly how.
Whether that's a death, right? It's his body died, so.
Well, I mean, you could argue
make the same argument with Jesus, is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, multiple truth hypothesis. You say like anything's possible, but I'm saying from your average mindset of a Jew, or even a Muslim or a Hindu, it's nonsensical. Like it completely makes no sense that the deity, the creator and controller of the material realm, would have materialized in this form for the purpose of being crucified.
Guess there's no precedent.
You're having second thoughts on Christianity. I mean, you're the one who told T-Jump, like in pantheism, there's no zombie god in this system. And saying like, the zombie god is, you can say multiple truth hypotheses.
The triomni being didn't originate with Jesus the Christ, so I'm somewhat remiss to go into this particular subject in too much depth. It's just too, I was like, it's tough for me.
Well, I was mentioning
every door I open
Jesus
is a
principle,
nightmare.
That there's like the concept of suffering on other people's behalf and being nice to people, even though they repay the kindness with hatred or negative things, even to, God forbid, the highest level of crucifying us, that and then forgiving the person for repaying my kindness by torturing me and killing me, that I could see a benefit to the Jesus principle. But it's saying like, no, I'm not a Christian. Like I don't think that I wouldn't worship that element as God. So I just mentioned I believe in the Jesus principle. I was mentioning it in terms of this concept of being nice to people and asking for nothing in return, even if they return the kindness with negativity. But to extend that to thinking that the Jesus principle is in fact representative of the one true God who created and controls the universe, to my mind, into, I would say the average Jew and Hindu's mind is absurd. I'm going to say it's impossible, like multiple truth hypothesis, but I say like, no, man, like from like to extend the Jesus principle to deification and saying not only, like deification, but the one true God and the only deity, to me, that's absurd.
Well, it would be with multiple truth hypothesis. You feel that your personality
multiple truth hypothesis is
a little
absurd.
bit
It's
with
saying
the
it's
Jesus
impossible.
archetype.
I didn't say it's impossible. Saying that it could have a truth value. That the one true God, was Jesus, and it's saying that like multiple truth hypotheses still have some sort of value in the truth, truth discovery. That it's a possibility. But to say that it's a likely possibility, even in my mind, I would say like no, I don't even think it's a likely possibility.
Yeah, I guess to me the idea of possibilities being likely is sort of misframing, because if something's either the case or not the case, there's no real probabilistic.
Well, it's a multiple truth hypothesis because of uncertainty. That you're saying like it is probabilistic. I think even T-Jump was putting it like that. That said like, I mean, like if you ask me on a level like, no, I'm not a Christian. In the basic tenets of Christianity, to me seem absurd. But I would still leave it as a possibility.
Yeah. Always good to leave it.
I was surprised you. I mean,
the rigidity can kill you.
You like you and Gandalf, like historically have been some of the most, besides Claire, like some of the most anti-Christian people I've ever heard. So to hear you on that debate, just modding it, and even today, like the fact that historically you've been one of the most vehemently anti-Christian people I've ever heard.
So that means now I have to abuse somebody who abides by that religion?
No, you don't abuse them. I'm saying to just reject the possibility that it's true. That it's saying that, like, just say that it's absurd, like it's nonsensical. Now, you don't have to abuse a person just because they follow an absurd, nonsensical belief system.
Okay.
And I said the Jesus principle is generally venerable. You're saying that they accept and venerate the Jesus principle, but the Christianity to turn a religion or say that the one true God is this Jesus character is borderline absurd. I don't know if you're a Jew. You're saying that there is no such thing as a deity, like Krishna or anything, that like God does not incarnate in any form. So from a Judeo-Islamic point of view, any form of incarnation is absurd. Let alone that to put like no, any form of incarnation according to a basic Judeo system is completely absurd. Let alone that if somehow this absurdity of the one true God incarnating into some sort of form would then die, is double absurd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't understand why was that unexpected what I did there? Like, what would you have how would you have expected that to go? For me to debate him more? Or what?
No, I wasn't, but I was saying that historically you're one of the biggest critics of Christianity on the web. And like usually you're not so friendly. Usually you're straight up pretty just calling out the absurdity of it. So like no, I mean the fact that you demonstrate the impulse control, just mod it or not express your opinion, I want to say it's like no, it didn't surprise me. Like the fact that you're capable of demonstrating self-control and just serving a function without inserting your beliefs or your opinions, like didn't surprise me. But I'm just saying like no, I mean historically, like I remember hundreds of hours of Jennifer for scathing criticism of Christianity. we got to bring on Gandalf or something. We're saying like you couldn't have Gandalf on for more than a minute or two without the conversation reverting to a scathing criticism of Christianity.
I think that maybe was more Gandalf's on his side. For me, it's always a response. So I don't care if people are Christians. I draw the line at proselytizing, and that's not unique to Christians, just across the board. Nobody likes it. And the point
I mean,
that
your first T-jump debate was almost classic, where he slip of the tongue, instead of saying reincarnation, says resurrection, and he's like, reincarnation. There's no zombie god in this system. I mean, do I have to play the tape for you? You don't remember saying that? Where T-jump
okay. Well, like
resurrection
what's
instead of
why
reincarnation, and you
why
said
are you such a
reincarnation,
zombie phobe?
dumbass. There's no zombie god in this system.
Oh, okay, I see. You have a presupposition that zombies are somehow undesirable. Well,
No,
I
I'm saying that's
guess I
what
don't know
you
what to say
said.
about that. I thought you were impartial.
No, I'm saying that's what you said, and that was, a direct criticism of Christianity, that, like on a big platform on modern day debate in front of hundreds of people, where you referred to, the resurrection, to Jesus as the zombie god,
Where I was representing
which
myself.
is common among Hindus. I'm saying because in India, there's a lot of anti-Christian sentiment. There's a lot of anti-missionary sentiment, and so I've heard you're not the first Hindu that referred to Jesus as the zombie god. But I said, like, no, I mean, like, there's a tape of you on modern day debate in front of hundreds of people, yelling at T-Jump about no zombie god and pantheism.
He's great.
No, that was you, not him. You're the one who yelled at T-Jump, said there's no zombie god.
Yeah, it wasn't my best
pantheism.
performance, so I'll give you that.
Well, no, I mean, it probably was your best performance. I'm saying now, like, you're saying that this guy Matt scared you, in the T-Jump, he scared you, and now you're taking back your extreme criticisms of Jesus.
Wait, who scared me? Sorry, who scared me?
I had the wrong name. The guy on the T-Jump Discord debate. Matt Slick.
Well,
Matt
that wasn't
Slick
a
scared.
debate. That was an AMA.
Well, I'm saying, I'm saying the AMA, but he scared you, and now you're taking back all your scathing criticisms of Christianity and Jesus.
I listened to his voice for a couple minutes, and it just struck me to my core, put the fear of God right back in me.
Yeah, I mean, he just was straight up like, yeah, I mean, you're going to hell forever. I'm sorry. Like E. Michael Jones. When I asked him about reincarnation, and he said he had a friend that was on the deathbed, and he told him, like, he's not scared of dying because he believes in reincarnation. And he said, like, no, I'm sorry, you're going to hell. There's no reincarnation. I don't know if you remember on Brundle when E. Michael Jones came and asked him a reincarnation. He's like, no, you're going to hell forever. There's no reincarnation.
Yeah,
So
Mushroom Head is certain there's no reincarnation.
But I'm saying that's basically what Matt Slick, like, you didn't debate him, but like he probably would have said, like, you told him your pantheism, like, no, I'm sorry, Jennifer, according to the true understanding of Christianity, you're going to hell forever. You're not getting reincarnated. You're wrong.
Some arguments
you're saying
aren't worth addressing.
Matt Slick scared you, and now you're taking back all your scathing criticisms of Christianity.
I was representing the Teach server, not myself. I'm capable of being.
I didn't ask you
very
why
balanced.
You were behaving at that time in a professional manner. I was asking if he scared you, and you're taking back all of your scathing criticism of Christianity. Here, you don't even seem to be admitting. I'm not asking you why you were
It's fine.
professional.
That's not what happened. No, I thought you were joking around.
Of the hundreds of
no
times
joke. Fine.
I've heard
my
your
God.
scathing criticism of Christianity. Are you rejecting? Are you saying I have a false memory of the hundreds of times I've heard your scathing criticism of Christianity?
You don't have a false memory. You're just fine.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, no, I mean, even Doovid's been like, cool it, like, yeah, like, enough, like, I'm a Jew, like, it's saying, like, no, we don't turn the other cheek, like, we don't believe in Jesus. But even Doovid was like, cool it with your scathing criticisms of Christianity.
I still don't understand what. Yeah. I thought it was a success. It was very challenging. I wish I'd had more time to prepare. And about, I don't even
For
know,
me, that's
not
easy.
long.
Right? I mean, because like I've been an event organizer or assistant, rabbi's assistant, guru, uh, assistant, all types of things, and just serving somebody else, maitre d'. Like I've done so many times, very easy, because you're saying the questions aren't for me; they're for them, and so you just be professional. You don't have to take anything personal, and you just hand it off to the other person. So I mean, to some extent, it's very easy.
It's different kind of hard because it's improv. You don't have a
Or
script.
say not improv because it's not for you. You're just you're the liaison.
I had to improvise what I was saying, unless I'm just going to sit there like a mute.
But it wasn't about you. You were just
I know. I still had to say stuff though.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like that would have been relatively easy. I mean, that's what Brundlefly, like Doovid is like automatic co-host. Because I've been doing stuff like that for decades now. So like Doovid could be like, even on the pop on, like, Brittany, Todd didn't have their act together. So like Doovid became like, politically provoked, just like automatic co-host.
That's awesome.
So I was saying you're not quite there in your training to be like automatic co-host. Like isn't just easy because like it's not even about me. So it's like no problem. Just like no problem. You need me to help you officiate, I'll officiate.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, you're doing amazing. I'm so happy to see you on all these different shows, showcasing your talents. So, chat says, Duve is trying to ask if my view of Christianity has changed. No. My views don't really change that much, but my approach to things changes. And me, doing another BTFO isn't going to change much. So what's the point? It's not just about, you always got to remember the, do I look fat in this, right? It's like, no matter what the answer is, you want to be diplomatic, or you're just sort of sabotaging yourself in a way to hold that. Ugh.
Whereas usually in life, it's not about you. Very, very rarely in life is it about you.
People want to make it about you sometimes. So sometimes it's about oneself, but usually
sometimes it is about you.
Ideally,
Sometimes
it's
you are
about
the center of attention.
ideally it's about ideas and people relating through ideas in a positive way.
Yeah, I mean, very rarely it's about you. And so, like, yeah, I mean, if it was AMA with the Church of Entropy, it'd be about you. And it's like even like JF, who's has like maybe he does once a week AMA, but like no, I mean, very rarely it's about you. And so and it relieves the tension to understand that it's not about you. So like, the people having, so one of the simplest mismatches of perception is that the person thinks it's about them, and that's what creates amount of dissonance. So just the simplest understanding it's not about you is relieves a substantial amount of the dissonance.
Well, if I never thought it was about myself in the first place, am I all right?
Well, I'm saying it's just a huge dissonance creating factor. And so, doing something on behalf of someone else, it's more difficult when it is about you. And so thinking it's about you when it's not about you, is unnecessarily making it difficult, because when it's about you, of course, it's more difficult because there's a lot more karmatic considerations. So, people cause themselves trouble with unnecessary karmatic considerations, thinking it's about them when it's not.
I didn't think that was about me. It was more, I was looking for feedback as to how I did. I at no point thought that was about me, if that's what you're alluding to. But yes, it's a very good point.
Yeah, and it's
That's
like
why I
your average
focus
person,
on
like
ideas.
no one would even thought like, how'd you do, because it wasn't about you. It's just like, okay, like I helped out at the Hare Krishna temple, and like Gopal Krishna Goswami came and I did a whole bunch of things for his appearance, or like I used to drive around rabbis or various things, and saying like your average, like maybe a few people that helped organize would like thank me, tell me like really good job. But like no, most people didn't even notice me. Like I'm just the guy helping, and if I did a good job, they're really only going to notice if I do something wrong. So okay, so I'm your friend, I'm your co-host. So he's saying like, yeah, I'll tell you how you did. You did pretty good, but like I mean, generally, um, it's a sign that you did good that no one even noticed because it wasn't about you, and you just facilitated for the benefit of the other person to such an extent that no one even thought much about you. You were just the facilitator. You did your job, and so people didn't even think much about you. You just facilitated in a way that no one would even thought to think, oh, the church venture there. So they no one even know you see what I'm saying?
Are you saying no one noticed, or it's a success that
It's a success that no one
consider a success?
noticed or thought
one
no one
notices.
noticed or really thought about you because you were just facilitating, and it required enough of the person's cognition and attention to think about Matt Slick. So the fact that except if like Doovid's an event promoter organizer, so like maybe I notice the help. The average person doesn't notice the help.
I was reminded of when you always say you got to be promoting the after party on the stage of the party.
Yeah, I'm saying okay.
so
I
true.
always at the Hare Krishna temple. I always went in and thanked the kitchen staff. I always try to thank anybody who does any part of anything, if it's possible. But like certainly like and nothing at the Hare Krishna temple was ever about me. But I helped out, and I always made a point of helping, saying thank you to the people who washed the dishes and cooked or did any part of the service, because you're saying that you needed all of those people's help without that the event couldn't have happened. But the average person at the event, like I might have been many times the only person who thanked those people because because I was I guess like the kitchen manager or something like that. I'd still be doing it. I'm scared of COVID-19, but I was like the kitchen manager, so I was probably the only person who thanked most of those people most of the time, and they weren't necessarily doing it for thanks, but like the priest or the other people, or whatever of the deities. So the event goes smoothly. Um, the people just I mean, some people are nice and they make a point to thank the help, but your average person, no, they don't even bother thanking the help. In fact, they complain. So like saying like all the people doing the kitchen staff serving the food, even though we're volunteers, people are more likely to complain than say thank you. Saying like you do it better, even though we're doing it out of the kindness of our heart and not getting paid anything. But saying we get a lot more complaints, and not saying you get complaints because we did something wrong, but it's saying just that's the way people communicate. That they're more likely to communicate how they think you could have done something better than than to be like, oh, really nice of you, really great job. Except the people that are part of the people that help, and the other people that help know that it's important that other people, just like I said, a lot of people, if you treat them nicely, you're like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? What are you trying to do to me? It's like, no, I'm just a nice guy. And because they're not nice people and they're not used to being nice to others, they don't understand how you could just be being nice to them. So also most people would have never thought like, I'm going to go to the temple and help out in the kitchen and serve food and not ask for anything in return. Maybe they think we're being paid, or maybe they think like all these good things are happening to us for doing this, so they wouldn't even think to say thank you, and then they would even complain. They're saying like like I wanted bigger helping. It's not, like or like there wasn't enough paneer, like like you didn't give me enough paneer, like give me a few more pieces of paneer, and then like be upset at you. It's like, dude, like like there's got to be enough for everybody. And the jerk serving only wanted to give me a few pieces of paneer. Saying like that's the unfortunate reality of human nature. And but I said like, yeah, so if the event goes well, it's just going to be no complaints, and maybe you get a few help afterwards, and a lot of times the guru doesn't even thank you. So if it's a good guru,
You're supposed to thank the guru.
Well, I'm saying that the
Moral
guru.
outrage prophet wants to know if I've eaten the free food at the temple. Very mysterious question here. I've been to a Hare Krishna temple. Like, I'm not even sure if I've actually been in one. I've had a friend who is very passionate about, I think his name is Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, but I don't think that guy's a Hare Krishna. It's Ashtavakra something, Gita or something. I can't even remember what his devotees are implored to follow. That was at his behest. And no.
I drove
didn't.
rabbis, and like good,
And if
not
John
having to
Williams,
judge
if that question is directed at me, I don't even know what you're asking.
Well, I mean, judge like the the guru or the rabbi, but it's like, and what is like good or bad. But it's like I drove some rabbis that never even said hi to me, never said thank you. They just got and
You
a lot of
shouldn't
times they were.
expect them to.
I didn't expect it. I'm just telling you that
Good. You expecting that kind of stuff is a violence against them, and they're the ones who are going to help you. So you don't want to be doing a himsa. You don't do himsa against those who can help you. And
Yes,
expecting
I'm just saying
from learned masters is a fast way to get nothing.
Well, it's a personality, and my personality is more. I mean, some made a point to say thank you, and saying that there's certain gurus, even like Gopal Krishna Goswami, have huge crowds that made a point to speak to everybody and to help the staff, and then other people come and don't even say hi or thank you to any of the staff. And I'm saying, like, okay, to expect something in return. I'm not saying, but you can notice that, and so I'm saying, like, no, I mean, usually most people don't thank the staff. So if someone comes from out of town and you do all this stuff to help make the event, maybe it's half. Like Hare Krishna people are pretty nice. Most of them generally, came over and said thank you or spoke to me. But it's saying, like, I dealt with a lot of people that never said hi, never thanked me, even though it was clear that I was helping. And okay, my own personality, should have expected something or judge them? Is like, no, I didn't judge them. Although generally, I try to thank everybody involved in the process. So I was just saying that for Jennifer facilitating, it wasn't about her. And like, did anyone thank you? Did anyone say good job, Jennifer? And she's saying, like, well, no.
I did.
I mean, so Doooovid said good job, Jennifer, but like, did T-Jump even say good job? Did anyone else say
Yeah, a
good
bunch
job?
of people did. It's the P word privilege, right? Wah, 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 wah. I'm trying to find the restaurant near my old school that may have been Hare Krishna. Possibly.
And sometimes, like, you have the the paradoxical where the number 2 is really the number 1. So you've seen that a few times where it looks like the servant, it looks like you have master and servant, and really it's reversed, and the person who's in the apparent servant role is really the master, and there's certain reasons and times why that might occur. And so, okay, the person who's serving is actually bigger than the one being served, but there's certain larger reasons why the number 1 is in the number 2 role.
Very interesting. Do I like the food? Yes, it's quite good. Yeah, I mean, I would put that as like they're complementary, but really the servant is more a subset. Not like it's a skill set that ever goes away. It's just that it can't remain the sole skill set as it
A lot of times it's
malfunctions
low high birth
easily.
also. Like if you took low birth, so the people who do the functions of the people who took low birth, as opposed to if you took high birth, you don't notice as much the people who took low birth. And sometimes you even say, like, gurus doing things themselves, like driving themselves. Like very few gurus drive themselves, but occasionally you have a guy like took low birth, and he likes to drive himself because, like, like, no, I remember when I was a nobody, or like I used to drive. I like driving.
There'd be people who'd reject on the basis of never having driven oneself in a culture like this.
Yeah, so you took very high birth. Maybe you've always been driven, and so you wouldn't really think to speak to the driver, let alone to drive yourself. So he's saying like, no, I took low birth and I studied and now I'm the master. But because I took low birth, I know how to drive. I like driving. I don't need someone to drive for me, so I drive myself. So but like rabbis, Hindu gurus, like a lot of people, very few of them drive themselves, and usually the ones that drive themselves are the people that so to say come from some sort of non-Brahmanic background and came to that later in life, and that's why they drive themselves because like in their early adult years they weren't a guru and came onto it later, so so they drive themselves. So
Or just because you really want to make sure you get picked up in an elephant when you finally do go back to the Holy Land.
So there are certain elements like the high-low birth element in the gurus that have always been served to the people who worked their way up and were servants and now are being served. And so the level of their perception of the world, where I don't remember what it's like to serve because I've always been served, to saying like, no, I remember when I was the servant and now I've became the master. So the person who used to be a servant, person who took low birth and worked their way up, is usually more empathetic towards people who took lower birth than people who took higher birth and didn't work their way up.
Yeah. It's ultimately a principle. It shouldn't exclude on principle of a virtue of, birth.
Well, I was saying it's factual.
It's abstract.
It's a factual element of karma.
Sort of see yourself as a servant of the laws of physics. And then by completing the servitude to the laws of physics, you become also master of the laws of physics because there's no difference on that level. But who wants to take the time to do that, right?
We're saying like, have you ever done a hard day's labor? And it's like of course not. Of course not.
Not really.
I took high birth. Why would I have ever done a hard day's labor?
Would be considered relatable by reasonable people, and I hope that they can see that.
Well, it's in perspective, saying like, okay, like I know what a hard day's labor is because I've suffered. And then if you're in a place where say like, no, like I don't know what a hard day's labor is, I haven't suffered. Well, like, how come you haven't suffered? Because like I took high birth and I always did the right thing and I didn't have to suffer. And so there's a certain factual reality to karma, and then there's a certain level of understanding people whose situations you've been in. And then it's okay, like God forbid, I've been arrested, like I've been in handcuffs, I've been in prison twice. I mean, just for a day I didn't have the charges dropped, but it's saying I know the feeling of what it's like to have handcuffs on, to be in the back of a cop car. Like I know what it's like to be in a fight, to have someone on top of me trying to hit me, even if it was in my youth. And why? Because I took low birth, because I made mistakes in my life. I did things that I probably shouldn't have. And if someone said like, no, I have no idea what it's like to have handcuffs on and be in the back of a cop car. I have no idea what it's like to have someone on top of me hitting me in my face or something like that. And you could say like, well, good for you. Like it doesn't make me a better man that I've had handcuffs on in the back seat of a cop car. So it's like, no. But to some extent, the expression the Kabbalists use is ein tzaddik omed b'makom bal tshuva, that a perfectly righteous person can't stand in the place of a newly repentant. And because they can't relate to sin, the perfectly righteous person, the person who took high birth and was trained from youth, right and wrong, and never made these mistakes, can't relate to the sinner, because they're like, well, why would you sin? Like, what possibly could have been going through your mind that caused you to sin? I really just can't relate to the person. Like, no, like I remember when I was a sinner and I made poor choices, and I could see myself in you because I was like you, that person who was sinning and making poor choices, to the person who knew what was right from youth and never made these poor choices and can't even relate to the possibility of like, no, I just can't imagine making these poor choices that you're making.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of the prophet. Was it prophet from the city or the Swami from the city? How was it that you put it?
Well, the Talmud uses the
sage.
the prophet from the countryside versus the prophet from the city, and specifically related to the king's harem. That like JF, where really, like had to wait for years to eventually make out with the town slut in the backseat of a car, to versus the like, I don't know, like Jeffrey Epstein's son who grew up with the harem. And so the prophet from the countryside, when he gets to the city and sees the king's harem, it you can't see past the king's harem, because there's nothing that exists like that in the countryside.
Mm.
And it's also kind of like the Gilgamesh and like Enkidu, the wild beast. So the king, the leader of the city, and the man who lives like a beast in the forest, and they fight and they wrestle, and the man who lives in the forest is able to win or have an even match in a wrestling with the top man from the city. And then the king allows him to have relations with a prostitute, and then he, so to say, becomes civilized. He could no longer sleep in the forest anymore. So like when he was in the forest, there was no such thing as a promiscuous woman. Like the phenomenon of a prostitute just didn't exist. And that, but once he got to the city, like of course there's a phenomenon of the prostitute. So the Talmud speaks in a crude manner like that. And I use the expression the country boy with the high IQ, but saying like, no, I mean, you're a country boy with a high IQ. You can't imagine going to City Hall and the person behind the desk being your cousin who you go to synagogue with, because like the phenomenon is just impossible. You might understand karma, science, you might be physically fit, but the phenomenon of the person with this position of power being your cousin who's going to help you because they're your cousin doesn't exist to the person from the countryside. And even the I mean, God forbid, in the crude aspect, the access to the harem, that you could be the best looking, best person from the countryside, but you don't getting access to the
Yeah,
harem.
you circumvent a lot of that bullshit when you
Well, I'm saying you gain access to the harem because you're royal blooded. You're saying the
or
harem
if you're
exists.
a female.
Well, in a female, well, I mean, it doesn't really exist for females. I mean, the Talmud doesn't give that
That's true.
example. But I'm saying the king has a harem, and the harem doesn't have the harem only has relations with the king or the king's son because they're royal blooded and they have potential to be the next king. So even if you possess all of the great qualities from the countryside, you're not the king's son. You're not going to be the next king, and you're not going to gain access to the harem. It wasn't created for you. So the prophet from the countryside just can't understand the harem.
Krishna and his gopis. Skyworks 600 wants to know, or says, Doovid is constructing or attaching himself to a mythological worldview in an effort to reconcile what he considers perceived ills and injustices.
No, it's not perceived
we
ills
all,
or
though?
injustice.
Aren't we all
They're
doing
saying-
that?
Well, I'm saying it's karma. So that's why I say, like, when you come to the city, and like God forbid, like you like, if it's a dystopia and like Doovid picks you up at the airport, and then in the distance you see like God forbid, like a woman being raped or someone being murdered, and Doovid's just like, oh, don't worry, and we just go to our destination. You're like, didn't you see that? Like, what's going on? He's like, no, I mean, it's the city. This happens. Like, you can't do anything about it. That's karma. So the countryside, the karma might play out differently. And so like JF, like when he's interviewing Luke Ford, and Luke Ford asked him in detail about his sexual history, and he said his first encounter with the town slut in the backseat of a car. So if you come from a small town,
That's weird.
you only have a small number of women that you have potential encounters with. So if you're from a small town and there's only one town slut, you have to wait in line for the town slut. As opposed to, if you're from the big city, there's prostitutes on all the corners. So if you're a young kid and like, your dad takes you to the theater and you say, what's that woman there for? And so that's karma. There's prostitutes on the corners. You live in the big city. Like, as a little kid, you know that these things exist. But you come from the countryside, those phenomena don't exist. And so karmatically, it's very difficult to come.
Never really lived in the countryside per se. I'm just a
When
simpleton.
JF did, JF came from like a small town.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you were referencing my
And then it's say the
clumsiness.
extension of power, that they're saying that the person from the countryside can't fathom the type power that exists in the city. You know, to say, okay, you could fathom being really, really smart and understanding all these things and building up a network and connection, but you can't fathom coming from an extended clan family network, and even say that like an inherited position, that to say like, no, I have an inherited position, these people follow me because they were followers of my father. They're not going to follow you. There's nothing you could do. There's no greatness that you could reach, that these people are going to become your follower, but they're going to be my followers because they were my father's followers, and I'm inheriting them as followers. And so it's like the harem. You're saying like, I'm the best looking guy. I'm the most accomplished in all these ways. And you're saying that the harem isn't there because the king's son is the most handsome, excellent person. The harem is there because there's going to be the next king, and the next king is going to be the king's son. Even if the king's son doesn't have all these good qualities, and even if you have all those good qualities that the king's son doesn't have, you're still not the king's son and not the person who's going to ascend the throne. So this is the language that the Talmud and the Vedas speak in, and you look like symbolic, this type of metaphorical, mythological language, but it's related in the city. And you say like a lot of times like Jews are like that, and you're saying like no, like I know that I go to synagogue with people in positions of power in all aspects of government life, so to say. That I'm going to go to City Hall, and the guy standing behind the table that represents the government is going to be my cousin. And he's probably going to help me. And so if you're from the countryside, that phenomenon is impossible. There's no way you're going to come from the countryside and you're going to go to City Hall and the guy standing behind the table is going to be your cousin, and he's going to help you. And so that phenomenon of, call it high birth, can't really be understood by the person who took low birth. Maybe if you study the scripture and you see the scripture talks in that language,
Yes.
or you serve the rabbi.
Inheritance, essentially, is what you're alluding to here. The phenomenon of inheritance is unrelatable to the layperson.
Well, I serve big rabbis and say people will line up and kiss their hand. And so like, okay.
Did you hear what I said?
Yes, I mean, the phenomenon of inheritance is ununderstandable to the lay people. I mean, not to say it's ununderstandable. I could understand it because I serve.
I said unfathomable.
Well, I think it's fathomable.
Twas unfathomable too, I believe.
Well, that's my favorite story, the Nitya Krishna Das, tells about the enlightenment, where the guy comes from the small town and bows down to the most powerful person in town and says, "Can I be your servant?" And so they start serving him, and then eventually he's traveling with them to a bigger town, and he sees that he bows down to a person in the bigger town. So he, bows down to that person and says, "Can you be that servant?" And so on, till he eventually sees the king and bows down to the king till he becomes the king's servant of all the land. And then he sees the king in the forest one day, and the king bows down to a sannyas, forest dweller renunciate, and asks the king, "Why'd you bow down to this man?" And he explains to him why he bowed down to the sannyas, and from there he achieves enlightenment. So saying from Doooovid like that, to say, yes, because I served people who took high birth, I was able to understand the phenomenon, even though the phenomenon wasn't applicable to me. And because I read about it in scripture, saying I understood that I read the scripture and the scripture explained to me how these things work, and that I served people who the phenomenon existed for them, that I was able to understand and fathom the phenomenon and understand why this phenomenon doesn't exist for me, even though it exists for other people. And that's the concept of high and low birth. And that's why I mention it so often and why it triggers people so often. Because like, no, like I'm a Mayavadi, I am God. And just like the king's
Who are
son
you
has all these
thinking
things.
of?
Well,
You
most
thinking
people
of
that
Brett?
well, I mean, I've had a lot of people come on Week in Review. I mean, I guess most Domingo is the most triggered, I guess, by the high birth thing. But a lot of people get triggered by or don't understand it. And it could be like a Mayavadi tendency, like I am God, and I will have all of the things that the king's son has, even though I'm not the king's son. And you say like, no, that's impossible. That's why that's why the just mentioning the phenomenon of high and low birth is triggering to people, because you have to accept that these things you're never going to have, and that other people have these things and I'm not going to have them, and it's based on birth. So there's certain things that I could have that are not based on birth and I could achieve, and I work to achieve those things. And there's certain things that are based on birth that I'm never going to have, and therefore I don't waste my time trying to have what I could never have.
Very wise words to live by. Chat says karma is just a catchword for collective or individual happenstance and doesn't happen quite the way you imagine it to, which is why you attach so much to it. Karma is definitional, it means cause and effect. To say anything but that is quite immature indeed.
Since September,
karma is the most important concept that there is, because where we lose sight of reality is where we lose sight of causality, i.e., putting a little extra in there where we know we should be more frugal in terms of our understanding. We're just putting a little extra due to what our egos are telling us want. So I did a quick poll because I think your hair just honestly looks awesome. And so I asked the audience if this was your best hair year, and 83% agree. I mean, who is this mystery? Like, how much is that? 17%? What's up with that?
Wasn't just to mention, when COVID-19 hit last March, I haven't been to a barber since then. And about, I think, 5 months ago, I just cut with a large scissor. I kind of like, gathered my hair.
Oh my God, I did the exact same thing.
And just cut
hilarious.
like four or five times. At this point now, like 4 or 5 months later, my hair is almost long enough. I could just, go like this and cut in a few places, and it wouldn't be exactly even. But yeah, so my hair was longer the first time from COVID. Like, if I'm not sure, like COVID's pretty high right now. And maybe we'll close this thing in the high and low birth. But saying what the country boy, the prophet from the countryside, I mean, the promiscuous woman sleeps with the king's son, not because the king's son has good qualities, but because she wants her child to be royal blooded. So the promiscuous woman, there could be promiscuous women that will sleep, with the man from the countryside because he's athletic or good looking or something like that. But it's not the same phenomenon as the promiscuous woman who sleeps with the king's son in order that her son will be royal blooded. And whether there's such a thing as royal blood in modern day society or the language of scripture or something like that, but it's just there's multiple phenomenon, and I guess
there's the reincarnations of all the Kangs of history due to conservation of energy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying the Talmud and the Vedas use the example of the prostitute and the king's son to make to express this point. Saying there's a reason why that's the example given in in the Talmud and in the Vedas, because it's explaining a certain phenomenon.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think I should do more of those modding things. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you should try to do it for modern day debate, even, or even do it on your own channel. At a higher level, like training people and or so like I mentioned, politically provoked or something like that. But so you want to wrap up? You got anything else you want to say? We went a little longer this week, so I guess that's good. Less drama, more worthwhile things to talk about.
We didn't go into consciousness much, but that's fine. It's sort of an evolving thing, and maybe
Yeah,
it'll
I mean, not
never.
necessarily new
Maybe
insight.
we won't ever talk directly about consciousness. We'll just find better workarounds for the hard problem, because it is pretty abstract. And
Well, I think keep on doing the research and talking about it at a higher level. And I was mentioning, like, I've been doing a lot of reading on anatomy and neurology, and it's a lot of information. So it's not like I'm gonna study in 2 weeks and like get like a graduate degree, a PhD level understanding. Probably be doing this for a few years, and to actually gain an insight and proper preparation prevents poor performance. Really, the key is the research and the payoff from the research.
well, the contemplation too, don't you think?
Yes, I was saying we wouldn't expect like huge insights every week, and maybe this week I did actually less research.
I hardly do any reading. I just contemplate. That's what brings the results. So, I mean, if you're not doing at least 50-50, I hate to see you put all that effort in and not get results.
Well, I mean, the sages say if you put in efforts, there are results. Sometimes you don't see the results. The Mishnah ethics of the fathers. If someone says they achieved without working, don't believe them. If someone says they worked and didn't achieve, don't believe them. If someone says they worked and achieved, believe them. But so not saying if someone said they achieved without working, don't believe them. If someone says they worked,
Is that what you think I'm saying right now?
I'm just quoting a dictate from the sages.
Okay.
So I mean, it sounds somewhat like what you're saying, but that's why I just.
Well, contemplation is harder than reading, because reading, all you're doing is absorbing. Contemplation, it's going in two directions. There's an idea there, and your interplay with it, and your attempt to get more familiar with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't just read, but in the research, I contemplate, I chant, I do all sorts of things. But so this week I did less reading. Last week I read maybe even average of like 1,000 pages a day. This week you may be down to like 200 pages a day.
That's very high. Good for you. And how long does that take?
I probably read like 100 pages an hour on average. So like last week I maybe spent like 10 hours a day reading, and this week like 2 hours a day reading.
Nice.
It said
I feel like I'm reading and writing all day. I'm not really reading books, that's for sure.
The Karliner Rebbe, I remember when I was new in Jerusalem, and I went to a special gathering of Justus Hasidim in his school. He spoke in Yiddish, and like I was just getting good with Yiddish enough to hear, and it's like without a microphone, and there was like hundreds of people hunched over trying to hear what he said. And he said a good yeshiva student should have 3 4-hour study sessions every day. And I tried to, I wasn't really able to do that, like even to have 2 4-hour study sessions, but let alone 3 4-hour study sessions. But if you could sit, and generally my concentration, like a lot of times I drink or I get up and do something, but to have at least a few. So the week before, I definitely I was straight like study session for a few hours straight, multiple times during the day, and then even like 6 hours, like okay, streaming is 6 hours later. That was like reading and studying for like 6 hours straight, a few days, I mean 8 hours even one day.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I'll wrap up. I'm not sure if you're gonna ramble or.
Probably not. Unless there's questions in the audience, I'll probably wrap up.
Okay, so be in touch. This Friday, I have my debate with Cultured Thug, so there should be exciting. I think Politically Provoked has a pretty big lineup this week. Probably not going to follow any of those, but I'll probably watch them. Maybe I'll be in the chat. And Charles Moskowitz be
Yeah, like squad goals debates that Duve actually wants to flow. Just saying.
or even a topic that you care enough about. So Tuesday, Destiny versus Brandon Martinez on The Great Replacement might be an interesting debate. Although I don't really know either of those people. So like Norvin I actually knew, and then I was in the post show and discussed it with the debaters. I was able to critique and speak to both of the debaters. It's like Destiny Brandon Martinez. That's probably not going to be applicable. Like I'm not going to be able to speak to Destiny and critique his debate. So the flowing it exercise.
He might want to talk to you. I feel like he's been humbled lately, so that's always a good place to poach him.
Yeah, I'm saying he's like a gamer though, so like he probably has low concentration. That pop on his chat to be like, Doovid made a flow of your debate. You want to look at it? It's like, no, I want to play my video games.
Oh no. David
even
was
T-Jump,
dancing. He was now playing chess on his live streams. Next step up, dancing.
T-Jump
Destiny.
And, the low
the gamer
concentration
guy.
level. He wouldn't
You're
have
spoiled, I'm afraid, by this crowd.
Spoiled by their success that they wouldn't even do basic things that would help themselves because they've had enough success to.
Just depends how many times their face is grinded into the ground after hitting rock bottom. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. What I mean to say is it depends where people are emotionally.
Maybe humbled by
if you've got nothing to lose versus distracted by some object of material desire or other, right? You're just in a different place perspective wise. What you're open to is sort of different. Well, you've got the clout now though.
To be part of a self-improvement process, say no matter what results I get from other people or adornment or praise, that I'm always avowed to a self-improvement process. And saying that like the Talmud saying the evil inclination's always with you. It never goes away. Every time you defeat it, it comes back harder. So the likelihood when you're in a situation of success that the evil inclination will be able to remove you from that self-improvement process and convince you like I've achieved and now no longer have to continue in the self-improvement process, becomes more likely. So when you're in a case of failure, like of course you're like I don't want to continue to be a failure, so I'm going through the self-improvement process because I don't want to be a failure. But if you're already a success, you're saying I'm not going to go through the self-improvement process just for the sake of self-improvement, because the goal of the self-improvement process was success and I've achieved that success. So I mean just the basic,
we can just say entropy.
Holy books.
If you don't continue self-improvement, then you'll decay.
Right, so some people like Destiny and T-Jump never read the holy books, so they're not familiar with these things.
I don't know. T-Jump was like super fixated on religion, so maybe in his own way, he didn't read holy books, but he contemplated the ideas of theology a lot. Sort of its own thing. But Gandalf didn't even do that. Gandalf's just like obsessed with memorizing the contents of books to some extent.
Okay, so have a great week and see you next week.
Yeah, it'll be great. I think you'll eventually get what you're aiming for with this being a debate coach thing. So I don't know when it'll happen, but I think it will eventually fall into place. What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure I'm aiming for anything, so I don't like your clarification. But I'm saying that there'll be more students and there'll be more results and regular streams and things like that. Like I could see that you avow myself to the process, that the general expected results of avowing myself to the process I mean, to put it in the expectation and goals thing that like, no, that's not, that's not what I'm trying to do. But like, yeah, that's just what I would say the normal process of karma and avowing yourself to a process.
Great show.
Whether that's your purpose or expectation, you become, God forbid, the Jewing or the Luke Ford Hollywood type thing, and saying like, like I know your goal is to be famous, and so I'm gonna assume and push you along that path. It's like, no, that's not actually my goal. I'm just going through some self-improvement process, or trying to serve God, or some deeper spiritual thing, and you could explain it in typical karmatic terms that especially relate to entertainment or celebrity or something like that. I shared the stream at the beginning of the analysis of fame, but like, no, that's not my intention. But I would say like, yeah, that's the understanding karma and avowing yourself to a process and the results of the process as expected.
Maybe some food for thought is that the more you double down on the not wanting to be funny, the funnier it gets. So slowly releasing the pressure valve of hilarity may actually make people more serious about your words. Just thought.
No, I accepted what I saw in the holy books as true, and that's not going to change my mind. And saying, just like I was saying, that people may have been selfish from the day where they're born until today, and that's how they deal with the world. So also humor, that people find things funny, people laugh, is the facts of karma. But like, no, I read the holy books, I saw what they said, and I don't think anything's going to change my mind on that. Okay, so
I wasn't trying to change your mind. I was trying to leave the door open to possibility of a different method for achieving the same end. But
well, I mean, only like multiple truth hypothesis, because then like, no, I saw what the holy book said, that's what they say. Like within the multiple truth hypothesis, that there might be different methods or different truth values for different methods. But like, no, I've read the holy books, I vowed myself to the process, and I've accepted the truth. So this will have the multiple truth hypothesis to accept the possibility of other systems.
Great. Well, okay. I guess we'll talk next Sunday, if not sooner, and looking forward to it. So yeah, Skyworks 600, you get one life. Yes, that's correct. One lifetime per lifetime. It's one of those A equals A things, only it's actually true. One life per lifetime. So I guess that's infinity lifetimes in a way. So you're really only looking at a lifetime rate. How long do you have to not be alive for before the prospect of being alive is actually appealing? Yes, I agree about the books being a far cry from true knowledge, which is why books must be used in the proper role. I don't want to say sparingly, but once you get the wrong idea about books, it's hard to decondition yourself from that, because it's like the Socratic method. You just get so want to sink your teeth into the feeling of, it's like a fried chicken from KFC, very cheap, but also very delicious. All stuff in it to make it even deliciouser than it ever should be. Naturally. Food for thought. Looking forward to the next time. Talk to everybody. Seems like things are going pretty good. I'm excited for the future. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be moderately entertaining.
Your opinion, that's great. I'd prefer that in a college setting, where if I was in a class and I had like a theist professor and I could debate with him all the time about God while he was teaching logic or whatever, that I would enjoy that. That would make it a better experience for me, because I like the more confrontational engagements. So I'm totally fine with that. Be happy with it.
Fair enough. How
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of.
It's so important that she can't be told, she won't be told that it's wrong. And
bringing it back to Church of Entropy and her attack dog Gandalf the White.
Why don't you learn to shut up and fuck your goddamn logic?
they control the media, and the media is capable of making the sheeple believe in anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, we've had these streams, and I've been doing with Church of Entropy, and she's been bringing on new people, and like we did those streams on like stream etiquette. We walk through like the technology.
I have like very strongly negative opinions of the kind of Brundle clique.
Is she trying to garner herself cult prestige by associating herself with a retard?